my track was not able to graduate.
I thought that the students were being screwed.
There are a lot of reasons for undermining confidence in higher ed right now. This is just one more.
Get an inside look when a school closes its doors for good on College Uncovered. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm reporter Esteban Bustillos, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Jim Bradley, head on Boston Public Radio.
And why all 11 Brandeis women basketball players will leave if their coach doesn't. Plus, later in the show, Trump's election interference trial continues, and we'll get an update from CNN's John King. All that and more ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Kristen Wright. A hearing has concluded in New York to determine whether former President Trump violated the judge's gag order in his criminal hush money trial, with the judge yet to rule. Prosecutors say recent Truth Social posts by Trump violate the order that prevents him from publicly remarking on witnesses and others involved in the case. Speaking to reporters before the hearing, Trump did not comment on the gag order. He focused his attention on student protests over the war in Gaza.
Very radical people wanting to rip the colleges down, the universities down, and that's a shame.
The judge has yet to decide whether Trump is in contempt of court. The Federal Trade Commission will vote today on a final rule banning non-compete agreements. As NPR's Andrea Hsu reports, ahead of this vote, the FTC received more than 26,000 public comments.
The FTC estimates that 1 in 5 American workers, about 30 million in all, are bound by non-compete agreements. These are employment agreements that prevent a worker from taking jobs with the competition or starting up a competing business of their own. The Biden administration has argued that non-competes harm workers by preventing them from seeking better paying opportunities and stifle innovation. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce says non-competes are vital to protecting company investments and trade secrets. However the vote goes and whatever limits a final rule might put on non-competes, the future of such agreements will remain uncertain as legal challenges are likely to lie ahead. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
The world's leading sports anti-doping agency is defending its decision to stay quiet about 23 elite Chinese swimmers who tested positive more than 3 years ago for performance-enhancing drugs. The scandal has erupted just ahead of the Paris Olympics. NPR's Brian Mann reports.
The World Anti-Doping Agency faces accusations it covered up positive drug tests for the Chinese athletes in 2021 ahead of the last Summer Games. At a press conference, the organization's attorney, Ross Wenzel, said they believed the positive tests for trimetazidine were caused by accidental contamination in a hotel kitchen.
The ultimate source, how the TMZ got into the kitchen, was not discovered.
But the head of the U.S. anti-doping agency, Travis Tygart, rejected that explanation.
It's just nonsensical, and we got to get to the bottom of what really happened here.
Some of the Chinese swimmers are expected to compete again in Paris. Sports officials around the world are calling for an independent investigation. Brian Mann, NPR News, New York.
The State Department's annual report on international human rights cites several reported violations in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza before and after the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. It goes on to say the conflict between Israel and Hamas continues to raise troubling concerns for human rights. The report also cites documentations of crimes against humanity. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell opened the National Cybercrime Conference this morning at the Four Points Sheraton Hotel in Norwood. The event, which runs today through Thursday, features hundreds of sessions and seminars on all things related to cybercrime, all delivered by the top experts in the field. National Cybercrime Conference has become one of the premier training events for law enforcement, investigators, prosecutors, and forensic examiners. This year marks the 13th anniversary of that conference. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has weighed in on the chaos in the Back Bay over the weekend. Police received more than 30 emergency calls early Sunday about cars going the wrong way around Dartmouth and Marlborough Streets and drag racing up and down Comm Ave. Wu says she understands residents' concerns.
Our streets are public spaces that need to have a level of safety for everyone involved, those who are on the roadways, those who are in the area, and we're going to continue working with our community members to make sure that they stay clear and stay safe.
Police took down the license plates of about 40 cars from all over New England. Meanwhile, City Councilor Ed Flynn wrote a letter to Boston Police Commissioner Michael Cox asking police to be proactive with the summer right around the corner. In sports, Bruins and Celtics both off until tomorrow. Then it's back in action, playoff action. Red Sox open a 3-game series at Cleveland tonight. That is a 6-10 start. The Sox don't look now, but they've won 3 in a row. Sunny near 60 today, 57 right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Jim Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you very much. We'll be back at the library tomorrow. We'll be here on Friday as well. And Congressman Bill Keating is going to zoom in. He's just gotten back from Ukraine. And one more thing, May 3rd, we're going to be over at UMass Boston in Dorchester for a very special show featuring the governor, the new chancellor, and who else? Oh, and an EPA specialist.
EPA specialist?
Yeah, Gina McCarthy.
The former head of the EPA.
The former head
Gina
of the
McCarthy,
EPA,
who
that's
happens to
right.
be from Dorchester.
Okay.
She's a specialist, I would say.
She's a specialist, that's right.
So before we start, can I do my broken record thing?
Yeah, sure had.
Do you believe there's not a camera in this damn courtroom? I mean, it is just,
I know.
I'm sorry.
It's
I know
terrible.
it's every day, no camera, no audio. As you just heard on the national news, the hearing has ended on whether or not Donald Trump is in contempt of his gag order, which I would say is a slam dunk. The only question is the penalty. And any minute, maybe even now, David Pecker is returning to the stand as the first witness. You know, since Drudge said it, remember the headline on Drudge all night last night?
Trump's pecker.
Trump and his pecker, exactly. It's not us. Don't get upset. Complain to Drudge, not us. In any case, we will keep you apprised throughout the day of whatever's going on in the day 2 of the testimony in the Trump trial. What's that?
Drudge had another great item today.
What was that?
He said that what was Melania doing in the first day of the trial? Apparently she was selling $245 Mother's Day necklaces. I don't know. And you know, we thought maybe it was going to the defense fund, but we're not really sure.
You know, I have to say, because as people know we're not huge Trump fans. We'll get to the topic in a minute. The image, even I have to admit, the beautiful image yesterday of Trump surrounded by his family in the courtroom was really beautiful. His wife Melania, all his children.
He's going it alone,
all
Jim.
his girlfriends. And it was a beautiful, not one. We should talk to John King about that at 1:15. What's the speculation?
I know, that's interesting too.
In any case, we talk a lot on the show about the declining mental health of American teens, usually with a focus on the impacts from the smartphone use, increased pandemic screen time, and the toxic nature of social media in 2024. But new research out of Boston College explores the idea that it's not screen time that's failing our youth, but us, the parents, unwilling to let our kids go out in the world on their own, play freely without supervision. That's the crux of an idea brought forward by evolutionary biologist. His name is Peter Gray. The decline of unstructured play is the real issue. I totally agree with this, by the way. He wrote about this in his 2013 book called Free to Learn. In an era where 1 in 5 teens experience symptoms of depression, according to Kaiser Family Foundation, Gray is actually arguing that screens might, in certain cases, help to mitigate the issue vis-a-vis online gaming communities, let kids engage with one another outside their parents' watch. We want to hear from you. Call or text 877-301-8970. Do you buy Peter Gray's theory that we as parents ought to be doing less, not more, when it comes to structured after-school programs, supervised play dates, and general helicopter hovering. If there was ever a term that describes exactly what the problem is, helicopter hovering. The number is 877-301-8970. I know this will surprise you. I am not an evolutionary biologist.
Yeah.
But is it fair to say that I've been saying since we've been on the air for, I think it's 25 years now, that this notion that our kids are captive, can't go out and play, can't be alone for 2 seconds, even in our neighborhood, obviously inhibits their growth. Is it not obvious to everybody?
Yeah, I think the problem is, and there was another piece about this in the Washington Post that pointed this out too, talking about the same Peter Gray research, and it was saying that the problem for parents is it's very hard to do it when nobody else is doing it.
That's exactly right.
It's very hard to let your kids be roaming around the neighborhood when other parents aren't letting their kids roam around the neighborhood. And the fear is, it's just one of these stories points out that you hear about some gruesome kidnapping of a kid in Oregon, and you're panicked about it all the way across the country, thinking that's going to happen here, even though happily those kind of stranger abductions almost never happen.
And the abductions that do happen are usually from somebody who knows the kid.
But we act as though that they happen all the time. And they also pointed out in the story that, we think that, okay, we'll have them in after-school programs, they'll be, playing with the kids after school, but there's adult supervision of after-school programs. Okay, they'll be playing in the Little League team or the soccer league, same thing as the adult supervision. What they're arguing about is to let kids
be kids
on their own, work it out. That used to be, a million years ago when I was a kid. But it's like I said, you're afraid now. There's so much emphasis on safety now, safety, that you figure as a parent. I think what I'm reading is that you make one step away from the safety is everything, and you're a negligent parent.
I'm with you. By the way, do you know, one of the things I read in that story, I assume it was in the Boston Globe, about this Peter Gray guy, is a lot of state legislatures, I'm sure not ours, are working to immunize parents from litigation and possible alleged criminal behavior if they do let their kids just be kids. Free range is the expression I love for kids.
That was the woman on the subway, remember?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she left her kid in Bloomingdale's at the age of 9 and allowed the kid to take the subway home in New York City, and all the you-know-what hit the fan. She was a disgrace from coast to coast.
Well, we've mentioned this every time we talk about this topic, which is every few months when there's some other news hook, and today we have this Peter Gray thing, is that great show called Old Enough, with little Japanese kids who are like 2 feet tall, are sent off with a little flag by their parents.
Can see them with the cars and they'll get run over.
On the highway. They're walking along the highway to go to the
highway.
No, I don't mean on the highway, but on sidewalks next to the highway to go to whatever the equivalent is of a 7-Eleven.
They're going down to the 7-Eleven to buy a 6-pack for their parents.
And a carton of cigarettes.
That's
exactly.
Right.
877-301-8970.
By the way, kids used to do once upon a time.
Right?
I
know that.
Yeah.
So the questions are severalfold. One, you subscribe to this Peter Gray theory that it's the fact that we don't allow our kids to be independent that is really the problem, that it causes depression, or at least, even if you don't think it's the problem, is it a contributing factor? And regardless of where you are, where do you fall in the spectrum of freedom versus essentially jail for your damn kid? 877-301-8970. When you were a kid, were you able to just roam freely?
Well, I am a baby boomer. I used to, at 3 years old, walk up the street with my Ginny dolls, like a block away from home.
No, is that true,
really?
Yeah,
I'd play with my dolls on the steps up, away. And I remember...
And was your mother or your father... your father was a traveling whatever
he was a
guy.
Salesman.
So was your mother okay with that?
Yeah, she was. And I remember when I was little, we got to go on vacation to Williamsburg. And I was 6, and I rode the bus all around Williamsburg by myself all day.
Is that true?
I think my mother was a free range kind of mother, but it was different then. It's different growing up in the 60s and 70s. This is what one of the theories is, that things got really bad starting in the 80s.
Oh, that was the most important point to make. Behind his theory is this decline in mental health has been 5 decades, long before screens. Yeah.
And he's also saying, and this is really true, that parents spend more and more time with their kids now. I mean, we've talked about this before, but I think now, and I felt this as a parent too, you better show up at the games. You know, you better be, if your kid's in a game, whether it's soccer or track or the school, you better show up. I went through high school, you know, in the 70s where lots of parents didn't show up at anybody's game. It was very different then.
Really?
Yeah, you're a bum if you're not going to your kids' games now. I don't think that used to be true.
By the way, just like you, when you said you could walk down a block away, my mother was the same way. She said I could go from one room in the apartment to another room all by myself, and that was about it.
One more point we should make.
Only child, single mother.
And you lived in a high-rise apartment building.
I did.
I mean, that's the thing. You know, people, you know, moms interviewed over the years when I was at the Herald that talk about violence on the street and fear on the street. If you are in a dangerous neighborhood, that's
I was not living in the mean streets of Philadelphia.
But it's one thing, but still, even if you're on the 8th floor of a high-rise, that's different than living in when you can walk out the front door, walk out the back door, and hang out with your neighbors' kids and go in the Tarzan swing. That was another thing we all did.
Have you heard of this invention, the elevators? Have you heard of elevators? You take it from your floor down to the ground floor, and then you walk outside.
Yeah, okay, but I think it's a little harder.
Maybe it is.
In an apartment building.
877-301-8970. We're talking about this research by this guy at BC who is saying it's not screen time, it's actually the lack of independence of kids that is causing this, I guess, mental health crisis, particularly for teens. Where do you want to go?
Katie in Rhode Island, thank you for calling.
Hey, Katie.
Hey, guys. It's your favorite aggressive cleaner.
Oh, hey, Katie. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you for calling.
Hi.
Hi.
So I've been a teacher for 26 years. So is my husband, and I can definitely see a huge change in parents. Now being a parent of 2 young kids myself. So I think there was a huge change before COVID, but I think that COVID has completely exacerbated this helicopter parent situation. And our son actually got diagnosed with anxiety. We go to a therapist every other week. And I definitely see now parents just taking it to a complete extreme. And I can say somebody that had COVID hit them really hard. My mom died in 10 days before vaccines.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I tried it was insane. She died almost instantly. But as someone that went through it in that such extreme, I tried my hardest to not make this pandemic just so intense on the kids. I had a student once that their parents would have them change when they got out of school before they went home, to get rid of their germy clothes. The amount of stress that was put on these children, you weren't allowed to talk in the lunchroom. It's crazy.
But again, Katie, I just want to caution you. I'm not suggesting that COVID didn't have a tremendous impact and exacerbate this whole thing. This guy, this Peter Gray's thesis, as I said, is this has been going on for 5 decades. And maybe, again, it reached a peak during COVID, but this is not, this lack of independence, this helicoptering is not a new phenomenon, you know?
Agree. When I was a child, we had a great public park in our neighborhood, but it was probably 4 blocks away. And from probably 3rd grade on, every kid in the neighborhood was over there, and it was totally normal. And I'm very happy that we live in a very rural town, and I can't wait for our kids to just explore on their own and do their own thing. It's very important.
Katie, you were great. Thanks. Call us again soon. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970 is the number.
My son was 10 years old on his bike, rode to the other end of the street, and one of the mothers there brought him back to me. Okay, Pat from Sharon thinks this is due to the feminization of America, total accountability at all times.
What does that mean?
That we're being wussy, I guess.
That's ridiculous.
No adventures, helped along by mom working, so every minute needs to be nailed down. That's what Pat and Sharon.
You know what part of this is, by the way? Don't you think part of this
being only child of a single mother explains a lot.
Yeah, by the way, I have probably, let's assume I've told 10,000 people in my life that I was an only child of a single mother. You know what their first, exactly what that person, that explains everything. What does that explain exactly?
Well, you know.
Everything.
Your little quirks.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Jamie is smiling along with you. 877-301-8970. Peter in a car, what's up?
Hi, how you doing?
We're good, thank you.
Good. You guys crack me up. I'm headed into Boston, and it fills up my travel time. But
We're glad to hear it.
I did want to I wanted to chime in. I do agree with the Peter Gray theory. I've seen it also as a teacher of elementary students for, close to 40 years now. And I've seen a significant shift even before. Oh, there you guys are up on the billboard. Look at that. Boston Public Radio. There's beautiful face.
It's about time, don't you think?
Thank you very much.
How we looking there, Peter? Forget what you were calling about. How we looking on the billboard?
It looked very polished.
Thank you. That's the goal.
Took a
That's
long
what we're
time
looking. That's
to
what we're aiming
achieve that
for.
look.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Peter. Thank you.
Well, it's good to put the faces to the
Whatever. Voices.
radio.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And so I've definitely seen a shift, and it's hard to say. You can't really equate it to an individual piece of it, but I do think that neighborhoods have changed, the dynamics of families have changed, more dual income. I remember growing up, I grew up in a very nice suburban area where I was gone all day. My parents had no idea where I was all day. And I think that's different. I think I have grown children now, but the neighborhoods have changed. You don't see as many children just out free playing.
Well, you know what's a good example, Peter? When I drive around Cambridge and I drive by, for example, in summer, a baseball field, you know how many kids you usually see on the baseball field? None.
Yeah.
None, unless there's some organized little league or whatever the hell those leagues are called. Peter, thanks for the call and thanks for the commentary on the billboard there.
Listen to this one. I agree we've lost our way in free range. My son was 11 when he was stopped going downtown by the police to ask where his parents were. He was going to get a candy bar at the local variety store. I also had to get a notarized letter to allow my other son to walk to his private school in 3rd grade. But this person does think the stakes are higher today for kids when they make mistakes. We could make more mistakes and not have them impact our future, which is another good point. You know what this other story says? That one of the things I think that happens when both parents are working so hard is that kids, when they're little, at least like 3 or 4, they may want to help around the house, cooking or cleaning and stuff, but it takes longer if you have the kids help you. And that's one of the mistakes parents make now, is to spend the time to let them learn how to cook or clean up their room.
Make mistakes.
Yeah. And the other thing is says that if you go to the playground now with kids and the kids are up too high in a tree or something, the instinct now is get off the tree, get off the fence, get off the thing. And you don't want someone to break their arm, but on the other hand, if they're going to fall 4 feet, maybe that's not the end of the world, and they should have the chance of trying something that's hard and excelling at it.
I agree with every word there. Kevin and Randolph, you're next. Hello there.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, Jim. I'm with you on the detrimental effects of the helicopter parenting, but that started 40 years ago. In the early 80s is when I noticed. I was 25 years old, and I started noticing T-ball and the lack of pickup games on baseball fields and things like that. And that had a horrible effect. I've always thought, geez, they destroyed childhood. I grew up a certain way, just like anyone else in the 60s and the 70s, a free range. But then the smartphone came along in 2008, and it increased the problem exponentially. Data shows this. Jonathan Haidt, the psychologist, I'm sure you've heard about him.
Yep.
You might have even had him on the show. He shows that around 2013, Gen Z especially, the millennials largely escaped it. The youngest millennials, when the smartphone came out, were about 10 years old, so they had plenty of developmental years behind them. Gen Z has been just squashed by this thing, on top of the helicopter parenting, and that's why it's even worse now. So suicidal ideation started going up around 2013, anxiety, depression, especially in young girls. It just took a bad situation and made it even worse.
I think that is a fabulous analysis. And by the way, I should have said, I mentioned that Peter Gray says that in some ways social media can help. I'm with you. It's an exacerbating influence. But I think the important point you made is this started decades ago, obviously pre-screens, and then screens have been added on. Kevin, that was a great call. Thank you for making it.
couple of people have said one of the big differences, and it is true, although it pains me to say it, is when mothers really started getting into the workforce in the 80s too, there was nobody at home. So you didn't often want to have your 5-year-old kid at home without you, you know what I mean?
Well, but there's nobody home now, so what do you mean?
Well, there's more people home now. They're working from home.
Oh, that's a good point, isn't it? I forgot about that.
And that has made it easier, but I think for that long period of time when there was nobody at home, they have a name for that, right, Jim? The kids go home alone?
Yeah, what's it called?
Latchkey
kids.
Yeah,
Why'd you smile when you said that?
Because you were a latchkey kid.
I was
were
a
you
latchkey
not?
kid.
Home alone, were you eating salami sandwiches or whatever
really,
you had?
you were like Janie One Note kind of thing.
Jim was an only child, a single mother.
Oh, well, that explains everything.
No, it wasn't salami
Hebrew
sandwich.
National
Hebrew
Salami
National
Sandwich, which I did not make myself. Can we clarify this? It is true my mother, who thought it was a good thing, would give me one of those with an extra slice on top.
That's
for
right.
the 10,000th time I've explained this to you before I went to bed, which is probably not the best time to eat it.
That's right. Okay.
It's also very hard to digest something when you're lying down, do you know?
Okay. We're talking with you
Nothing
about...
like falling asleep with a piece of salami in your mouth. You ever done that?
No.
It's hard to
I have
breathe.
not, but it's
Wake up
something
the next morning
I
and
might look
sticking
forward
right
to.
there. It's unbelievable.
There's this idea raised by
Jamie's
this
envious.
Boston College
Jamie said, why didn't I have that when I was a kid? Go ahead.
Evolutionary biologist that we are helicopter parenting away our children's childhood. It's not just social media, it's that we don't let them out by themselves anymore. We're going to keep on talking about this for the next few minutes. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Michael Threets went from being an enthusiastic librarian to a beloved TikTok star. Now he's starting a new chapter as resident librarian for PBS Kids. Plus, we talked to television writer Bill Oakley of The Simpsons fame about his cult classic Mission Hill, celebrating its 25th anniversary. That's on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Rogers Fish Company, founded by Roger Berkowitz. You can welcome spring with New England seafood dishes, including double clam chowder, crab cakes, lobster, and fish delivered to your doorstep. Online ordering at rogersfishco.com. And S&H Construction, committed to building spaces that work and providing professional management to guide the process. Their podcast, Builder's Notebook, can be heard on all podcast platforms. shconstruction.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browdy live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. We're at the library tomorrow. We're also back on Friday. On Friday, Congressman Keating zooms in. He's just back from Kyiv, right at a pivotal time, needless to say. And by the way, we're going to get back to our discussion about helicopter parenting and this guy from BC, Peter Gray, suggesting it's not screens and smartphones that's the problem that's causing this mental health crisis for teenagers, but rather this extreme helicopter parenting. I'm just looking, I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with this. We'll get back to our topic at hand, but how we've normalized things. Here are the lead two stories in the New York Times. Judge considers holding Trump in contempt for verbal attacks. That's one. Two, could Trump go to prison? If he does, the Secret Service will go too. And yeah, you just read them like, okay, if he goes to prison, Secret Service goes to prison too. And by the way, did you hear on CNN last night? I hope I have the number right. Since 2021, you know how much he spent from his campaign accounts on legal fees? Legal fees.
I bet it's close
this
to
is donors.
I bet it's close to $100 million.
$77 million. $3 million in March alone.
Just shows if you get a lot of money, Jim, where you can get away with in the legal system, it's not fair, but that's the way it is.
Okay, back to helicopter parenting at 301-8970.
You know, the debate, whether it's cell phones, social media, or whether it's not playing, it seems to be like that. It could be a combination of things. And the story points out that adults always say to kids, "No, you're always on your devices. You're not out playing together." And kids respond by, at least some of them, we're on social media and our devices because we're not allowed to hang out together. And they point out that teenagers especially need lots of private time with other teenagers so they can hide what they're doing from their parents. And people that say, "I know what my teens are doing." You probably shouldn't know what your teens are doing, because that's one of the theories about the teen years. It's that interim phase when you're supposed to break away from your parents, and that a lot of the point of teenage life is hiding what you're doing. So
your parents had no idea when you were doing, right?
No idea.
None.
Your parents have any idea?
Unfortunately, they did.
Oh, they did.
There was
and
nothing
I had no
to
idea
share.
when my kids were doing it. I thought I did. Then I found out later, that there was a lot going on.
Why don't you tell people a little bit of what you were doing in your high school years that they didn't know about?
Right after you.
You were making out with the current mayor of Fall River. We know that. No, you were. What's that guy's name? That was like when I was 12. That was like a little peck of the cheek turning red?
In the playground, because you're bringing all these
It wasn't
things
a playground.
up.
It was under the football
stands. It was Oak Grove Cemetery, actually.
What's that guy's name?
Paul Coogan.
He's the mayor.
He's the mayor.
And you were
right.
making out with
him.
It was
a long time ago.
Okay, fine.
Nancy from Hudson.
That was the least of it, by the way. I know the rest.
I was only 12, Jim.
I understand. Exactly my point.
Nancy from Hudson, thank you for calling.
She was 12 at that time, Nancy.
Hey,
Go ahead.
You guys.
Yeah.
You're going to love this story. So when my kids were 5 and 7, we bought a house with a huge fenced yard. I'm not going to name the town because this story is well known and people will get mad at me.
Okay.
But in any case, every day they'd come home from school and I was working inside, and, well, not every day, but many days. And they would play outside, and I didn't pay a ton of attention. 7 years later, when my daughter was 13, we were getting ready to sell the house, and we were telling the people who were going to buy. Oh, she told us just before we were going to sell the house that she was really going to miss the gigantic, 70-foot tall Norway spruce that we had in the yard, because she had been climbing it, and I had no clue. And she had been climbing it and hanging out in the branches and reading and doing her homework and playing, and I was completely shocked. And my husband thought the story was, we both thought, oh my God, we're so lucky she didn't fall out of the tree and break a leg, but we also thought it was a hysterical story. So we relate it to the people who bought our house, and about a month later, the tree was chopped down.
Oh my God.
They had small children.
Oh, that is brutal.
Nancy,
that is brutal.
I can't believe you called with that story.
Why?
Because I live in a two-family, and the people that came in when we were on the second and third floor, there in the first floor, the people that came in, we had a tree house and this huge tree in the backyard, and they came in and they took the tree house down.
How young were their kids?
Their kids were like infants. I had kids that were like 7 and 10. Yeah, they were going to build a new one, and they never did, but they said that the old one was too rickety, and they took it down. Isn't that horrible? Yeah.
I mean, the people who bought our house are lovely people,
Sure
but
they are.
They
Okay,
moved
tell
to
us what town it is so we can read the stories. What town was it?
No, I'm not going to tell you because I'll get in trouble. It's a small town.
How small? How small? Tell us what letter it starts with, and we'll Google. Seriously, what?
M. It begins with M.
Okay,
as
then just
mother.
tell us the second letter. What's the second letter?
A.
A. One more, and then we'll let you go. M-A what?
No.
Come on, Nancy, one more. Give us the last letter, and then you can go. Last letter.
D.
D, okay. Check it out. You got it already? Marshfield. Okay, we're good. We'll check it out.
No, it's not.
It's not? Okay, we're going to keep checking.
It is not
Wait a second. She knows. Jamie, I can't. What is that woman yelling? What is it? Hold a second. What is it? Maynard. Is it Maynard? Obviously.
I have no comment.
A woman in the audience just yelled it out. Nancy, you're the best. Thank you. That was a fabulous story. By the way, Hannah, our colleague, not surprisingly, says, I lived in trees as a child. Are you surprised by that?
And what do we always say about Hannah? How even-keeled
like a tree woman.
and together she is. That's
do you remember
right.
that woman that lived in a tree like for a year and a half or
she was
something?
trying to keep it from being chopped down. Yeah, good for her. That wouldn't be easy.
Remember when I lived in a tree in Cambridge when I was a city councilor?
No, Jim was going to protect a tree from being chopped down. He was very courageous, and he arrived the day that the tree was going to be chopped down. And it was sprinkling. So he decided that
sprinkling.
He'd have this 80-year-old woman
She was not
tie
80 at the
herself
time.
to the tree, and he went to Starbucks.
That's not true. She said, I don't believe I brought this up. No, it is not what happened,
That's
Marjorie.
what happened.
What happened is she said she'd prefer, she didn't tie herself, she chained herself to the tree.
Even better.
And she said, can you go get coffee? And I did. Got Starbucks for
Jim
everybody.
was going to go in there like
Do you want a
Superman
sad piece of the story?
I don't remember. Got chopped down.
No, well, that's a whole other. I finally found out who did it, and I know that it's horrible. In any case, what's my point? Oh, the woman, a friend of hers just came up to me at Whole Foods or somewhere in the last few weeks. She just died, so that was sort of sad.
Well, she never got over being chained to the tree when you wouldn't go.
That's really.
Listen to this. This is an interesting theory from someone who just moved from Newburyport, Mass. to Palo Alto, California, and she saw kids out there in Newburyport. She didn't see kids hanging out, but in Palo Alto she did. All these 8-year-olds playing together, riding their bikes together, biking to school every day, and she thinks maybe it's the weather that might have make a difference out there.
Some. By the way, Nicole, another one of our coworkers, my parents were super strict growing up. I pretended I had an after-school club in middle school, and I would hang out at the public library for fun. I felt very rebellious. We're short on time, but Barry's got something good to add here. Barry, quickly, if you can, welcome to the show.
Sure, thanks. My name is Barry, and I was a former teacher, and now I run an organization that is a volunteerism organization.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we do is we take teenagers on service trips to different places around the country that have suffered disasters. And we just came back from our 18th trip in New Orleans. Teens love these kinds of trips because it gives them an opportunity to be away from their parents, to see different people, to learn about different cultures, to learn how to use tools. And I think that, we're failing our kids if we don't give them opportunities for them to expand their comfort zones.
Barry, what's the name of your group? It sounds great. What's the name of the organization?
It's called Volunteer Ventures Massachusetts.
Great. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's great, Barry, but they can't get rid of you on these trips.
Yeah,
that's
but they're
the problem.
free of the parents at least.
They want to be able to get rid of the adults.
I understand, but it's a really important step. I think that's a really good thing.
So it's a wonderful thing
Barry,
you're doing,
thank you for
but
the
it's
call.
a different thing, I think.
By the way, if people who live in Maynard want to email in, and if they want to in any way give us an update on the story about what really happened there with the tree thing, it's, what's our email? BPR at WGBH? At WGBH.org. BPR at WGBH.org. We're done, Marjorie.
Oh, listen to this.
Okay,
This is a real quick one. My mother used to say a person should consider their spouse to be their first priority, even ahead of their children. Now people would be horrified at that idea. And there's a lot written about that kind of thing, too, that now the kids come first and the marriage comes second.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
Goodbye.
Okay.
That's it.
We're going to talk with Trenni Casey.
We are.
Up next, we're going to talk about this little dust-up with Caitlin Clark, the basketball superstar, and this reporter out in Indiana, as well as what's going on with the Brandeis girls basketball or women's basketball team. Everybody in the team is going to quit unless the coach does first. We're going to hear about
When France was picked to host the Summer Olympics, the country promised to transform some of the poorest neighborhoods in Paris. Now, with the Games just months away,
Our programs comes from you. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Andrew Lloyd Webber, Liz Cheney, Supreme Court correspondent Nina Totenberg, and news anchor Chris Wallace. BostonSpeakers.org. And Springpool Arts, presenting Robert Frost, This Verse Business, by playwright A.M. Dolan and starring Broadway and television actor Gordon Clapp, now through April 28th at Calderwood Pavilion. Tickets at BostonTheaterScene.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're obviously at the library tomorrow, Wednesday, and Friday, as we always are. We're joined now at the library by Trenni Casey. Trenni's an anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston, BPR Weekly contributor, and will be working big time during the Paris Olympics, which is only a few months away. Hey, Trenni.
Hi, guys.
Hey there.
Okay, Trenni Casey, let's start with this story about Caitlin Clark. She was at a press conference last week, and there's a little dust-up about what this reporter, the Indianapolis Star columnist Greg Doyle, said to her. After he introduces himself, he makes a heart sign with his hands at her, and here's what happened next.
Hi, Caitlin. Greg Doyle, Indy Star. Real quick, let me do this.
You like that?
I like that you're here. I like that you're here.
I do that at my family after every game, so.
Okay, well, let's start doing it to me and we'll be able to get along just fine.
So there's been a big brouhaha over this. What do you think?
So, listen, I don't know Greg Doyle well, but I've had interactions with him, and I know him a little bit. And I know that I sent you guys a column from Candace Buckner in the Washington Post. She also actually has like a pretty tumultuous relationship with him. They were colleagues. They had a falling out. They don't talk anymore. But I've had the same experience that she has, and I have not had a falling out with him in any way, shape, or form. But I have a colleague who did. He's a little goofy. He's a little odd. I didn't like this, obviously, because it feels more than sexist. It just feels like you're talking to her like she's a child and she's not a grown woman who is a professional athlete as an adult who was just drafted. Like, I understand that. So she does this heart thing that like started with Taylor Swift, and so a lot of the Swifties do it. Travis Kelce did it after a touchdown. She does it to her family. It's not appropriate. You wouldn't do that if the Indiana Pacers had, we'll use, because I know we're going to talk about that, I think salary discrepancies as well, NBA, WNBA. If the Pacers would have drafted Victor Wembanyama, who was the #1 overall pick in the NBA draft, and he had something goofy that he did, I don't know that in that press conference setting you would have done that. He did. I will say this. A lot of times reporters do things that incur backlash, and they say, they gave this half-hearted apology of, well, if I offended anyone and if this, he just fully took responsibility, said I shouldn't have done it. Looking back, it was cringeworthy. I'm sorry. I regret doing it. I will not do it again. I have learned a lesson here. So I think there's something to be said for that. I guess I'm more on the side of Candace Buckner's article in the Washington Post, where it was unnecessary, but I think the backlash also, it's a little bit of everybody white knighting for Caitlin.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, this, young woman can't handle her own, who's in the public eye. And I think that's just sort of the world we live in now. But I did feel like he was rightfully called out for it being inappropriate, but then maybe just when somebody apologizes, maybe there is a time where
he apologized profusely in writing. And again, it doesn't undo what you did. But we've talked for 25 years on the radio about honest, direct, not if I offended anybody apologies, like you just said. This is a sincere one. Again, doesn't undo it, but the guy knows he made a big mistake, and he's attempting to atone for it. The other thing you said, wait, one more thing you said that I want to, and what's her name, Candace what?
I think it's Buckner.
Buckner said it beautifully. Treat these women like they're Patrick Mahomes or LeBron James. As you said, you wouldn't do it to Victor, whatever his name is. And it's almost like they're not quite on the same level as the male athletes are. And you can be cute and condescending. And I think this is a good object lesson for a lot of reporters, probably.
I think a lot of women, and I think the women in the audience, and Marjorie, you can probably identify with this, especially when you are a young woman starting out in a profession. There is, I oftentimes when I worked, and I remember mostly when I worked in Pittsburgh as a team reporter for the Pirates, the Penguins, and for a long time I was on the Steelers beat. And a lot of the male reporters sort of treated me like a daughter, or at the very least a niece, sister type thing, but it was never talking down to me. It was a little protective, but protective in areas in which I, looking back, am really grateful. They wouldn't let me walk to my car alone if we were at a stadium until late at night doing live shots and stuff. Things like that, I think, are acknowledging, hey, it's different to be you. And I remember a story when Jason Kendall, who was a catcher in Pittsburgh and then was the Brewers signed him and traded for him in my first year as the Brewers reporter. And Jason Kendall went up in front of the entire clubhouse before spring training started, or as spring training started, and said, you will treat her with respect. You will not ask her on a date. You will not
about
me. You will not. I worked with her in Pittsburgh. She is a professional. And I will never forget that. And I didn't find that demeaning in any way, because a lot of times I would. I was, in 2008 when I was at the Brewers, I was 31 years old. I was just a little bit older than a lot of the guys, in some cases younger. And I would get inappropriately talked to and asked out a lot. And that team, I flew on their plane, I stayed at hotels with them. None of them ever did anything disrespectful to me. And I strongly believe it's because Jason Kendall, who at the time was at the end of his career, said, you do not treat her that way. You treat her like a professional. She's like everybody else. So I think there is a fine line of sometimes a female in an all-male environment does need someone to stand up and say, hey, you know what, let's not act how we used to. It's different. But this was different because this is an all-female environment. She's being, drafted onto a women's basketball team. and you're in a mixed room of mixed company. It's not just all male reporters, and it was creepy. Like the voice, everything about it was like kind of creepy.
Yeah.
By the way, I thought she handled it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she was great. I mean, very
calm.
young woman with a lot of class, I think.
You know, speaking of her, the other thing that bothered me, I don't know who wrote this story, this thing, you're all talking, which we did with you last week, I think, about how the number one pick in the women's WNBA draft makes $76,000 in salary as opposed to Victor
Wembanyama,
who made $10 million or whatever the hell he made. And there's this tortured effort to say, under the circumstances,
I don't think it's a tortured effort.
I thought it was. $76,000?
Listen, I think that, and I sent you, it was an MSNBC article, and it was written by a female writer, by the way. It was written by a female reporter. I don't think it's tortured. I think it points out that there's nuance to it, because the author of the article, and I guess she's a reporter, because it comes off a little like an op-ed, but also a little like a hard news story. You know, she points out that yes, there are still traces. Like the reason the total value of WNBA teams and the television contracts are smaller is because places like, and I'm going to call ESPN out here, ESPN for years have undervalued women's college basketball. They've aired their games and they've lumped them in with their championship broadcast rights for and no offense to field hockey. But it's in with those secondary sports that aren't money-making. We call them non-money-making sports at a university. Swimming and diving championships, things like that. Great athletes, but they don't bring in a ton of money, right? So she points that out, that bias towards women's sports has caused them to not have the television deals that they do. But she also points out that the WNBA women, and they acquiesced to what the owners wanted for financial flexibility, which is the NBA players get a 51% share of all revenues that go towards their salaries. So that automatically gives them, first of all, their television and their revenue is 100 times what women's basketball is. So there's a bigger pool and they get a bigger part of that pool. Whereas the WNBA athletes chose to try, so for financial stability while they're trying to build this league, only get, I think at the end of the day, it comes out to a 9.3% share of shared revenues. And it's a different chunk of revenues. So there are some economic things at play here. And I have made this point before that you can't ignore that we have been ignoring women's sports. That is a big piece to the puzzle. But you also have to take into consideration, and this is a point a lot of us have made, is that the NBA in the 1980s almost died. It was on tape to championships until Bird and Magic. It even took the NBA, I think that was 50 years after its inception. 50 years after its inception, it was really the Jordan era in the 1990s and the late 80s when that league started to become what it is today. It takes time. And I go back to an article, and we talked about this on this show, with the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League. And Stan Kasten, who is a huge investor in it, but also Hillary Knight, who is one of the athletes, said, we understand it's going to take time. Everybody wants us to get paid equal right now, but we're not on equal footing with them. And she said, we have to understand it takes time to build these things. And I know women are saying, I'm tired of waiting and all these, and trust me, I get it. I'm a woman, I get it. But there are factors at play, and it is what it is. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Well, except for all that makes sense, and I think it's true, but it seems to me that in light of the fact that this class, number one draft, is Clark, number 7, Angel Reese, maybe the entities, the ESPNs, the WNBA itself, which is going to make scads of money because of this year's class, maybe they reopen contract negotiations.
They're not going to reopen.
And maybe the NBA puts pressure on them to do that.
They're open. It's 2025 is when.
Okay.
So this season is going to have a major impact. And again, this is written about in this article I sent you guys. 2025, the 2024 season is a pivotal season for the WNBA because you have all these big names that are coming into the league who were previously playing college basketball. Caitlin Clark is just a catalyst for this league to get more attention. Last year, the league saw, I think, a 21% increase in ratings. It saw a double-digit increase in attendance numbers. They're looking to expand to 6 more teams because there are interest in bigger and more cities to expand this and make this a more profitable league.
How many are there, by the way? I don't even know. Roughly, do you know?
I think 12 or 15
Okay.
maybe, but I might be wrong about
Okay.
that. I should know that as well off the top of my head.
Looked it up myself. Okay.
Although sometimes, honestly, I forget how many NBA teams are. I'm like, are there 30 or are they 32? I sometimes forget that. So that's not a male-female thing. That's just a my brain and numbers thing. But they have a huge television
12.
and union renegotiation coming up, this collective bargaining agreement coming up this year. So what I hope happens, I hope the WNBA and the powers that be go to the ESPNs and the NBCs and the Amazons, who are all right now involved in rights negotiations, because they do their rights negotiations, I think, also alongside the NBA, and they say, we're worth a lot more money now. So this number here, that might have been fine 10 years ago, but this number has increased 10-fold or 20-fold or 30-fold. And I hope the women say, and you know why that number is increased? Because we have better players, we have better marketing, and we are stars that you should market. So 10% is not going to do it anymore. We want 30%, we want 40%, we want 50% of league revenues. We've gotten to a place where the league is financially stable enough where we can start to get paid the way we deserve to get paid.
We're talking to Trenni Casey.
So the Brandeis basketball team is in open revolt, as the Globe's Michael Silverman was reporting.
Women.
The women team, exactly, because they say that the coach has exhibited toxic and racist behavior.
This is a wild story to me, because usually, like a lot of times, you read these stories, and we experienced it with the Harvard women's hockey team, right? Where you had a group of women who came out against the head coach of Harvard hockey, and then you had a group of women who vehemently defended her. In this case in Brandeis, woman has been, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think she's been the head coach at Brandeis University since the mid-'80s, around 86.
I think that's right. Late 80s.
Like 85, 86.
Yeah.
And they experienced, at their level of Division III, a ton of success for a period of time. They have not recently been all that successful, and they have had player after player after player leave the program, and now they have the entire team, saying all 11 should be 12, all 11 women saying, I'm not going to play for this coach. If she comes back, I am not playing for her. And you have former athletes who didn't have an issue with her saying, I didn't have an issue with her, but I believe the other women.
That's my favorite part.
So
That's great.
So what it says to me is, it's kind of like when somebody says, boy, that guy's a real jerk. And I said, yeah, I've heard that about him. He's always been nice to me, but I certainly haven't heard good things about him. It's validating what those girls are saying. And for the school to say that she's now being reinstated, like, are you not listening to them?
Yeah.
And
Didn't they have a problem with the male coach, too?
Yes.
At Brandeis?
Yes.
So this is a pattern
This is
here.
a pattern here of allowing toxic behavior, not listening to your student athletes. And listen, I know at Brandeis it's probably, but if you don't want sports, then just don't have sports. If you can't police them and make sure that these people who are charged with, taking care of influential young adults between the ages of like 17 or 18 and 21 or 22 years old, like if you can't manage them, then you shouldn't be managing sports at all. I mean, these women and men come to school there for an education, but they also come because they love playing basketball. I just think it's a failure on the part of Brandeis leadership, and I can't imagine
stunned.
with the.
I think they may have to change their mind.
I think they're going to have to change their minds.
The entire team.
By the way, this is based on a wonderful story by Michael Silverman in the Boston Globe. You should check it out. We're talking to Trenni Casey. So, Trenni, I read this now legendary piece by Seth Wickersham, Jeremy Fowler, and Don Van Natta Jr. about Belichick and not getting a job. And the two things that stand out for me, and there are many things, people should read this piece, is one...
Called Voted Off the Island.
Is that what it was called?
Yes.
Right before the Atlanta football team didn't pick Belichick, but picked somebody else, Belichick still thought he was going to get the job, which is incredible to me. And number two, Kraft, and this is really, apparent, according to this reporting, at least Robert Kraft, maybe his son as well, were trashing Belichick to the owner of the Atlanta team, saying, don't hire him. You can't trust them. In your world, is this given credence? Do people believe this is legit?
It is, but most people, listen, I'm like you guys essentially. I'm a little bit closer to it, but I'm not in the Patriots. I'm not down at Foxborough every day. But people who are down at Foxborough every day say, listen, it's probably quite possible that Robert Kraft, maybe he just didn't need to say anything at all. Because what we can't really infer from the article is Did Robert Kraft call the owner, Arthur Blank, of the Atlanta Falcons, who's a very good friend of his, did he call him unsolicited and was like, listen, this guy is untrustworthy as a friend. I'm just telling you, you might want to look in another direction. Or did Arthur Blank reach out to Robert Kraft and say, hey, you know what? We're bringing him in. We're talking to him. There's some pushback in our building, because the article does, I think what gets buried in the article, and everybody sort of globs on and like hangs on to the headline, which is that Robert Kraft torpedoed Bill Belichick's ability to get a job post-Patriots. I didn't take that away. What I took away was a lot of teams looked at Bill Belichick, the amount of power, control, and the way he now coaches and builds teams as not really being a good fit for them. He's 70, I think he just
71?
No, he just turned 72 or 73. I think he just turned 72. He's 72. They don't think he's going to stick around for very long. And he ruined the Patriots offense. Like, that is indisputable. He ruined the Patriots offense. He built a great defense, but his I don't know if it's the fact that he just has such a big ego, that his ego ruined it, but he thought that he could just plug anybody in, plug anyone in to be an offensive coordinator, not put good players around like Mac Jones, and that was going to work. So I think that's more so what teams were looking at. But I don't think it helps if, like, your owner Arthur Blank is thinking, well, guys, let's bring him in because I kind of like him, and we're on the precipice. We're so close to having a team that could maybe, compete for a Super Bowl. Let's bring him in. If Robert Kraft calls Arthur Blank and says, listen, he was tough to work with, man, but you'd be an idiot not to hire him. I can't imagine that those conversations with his general manager and his president of football operations, his lead scouts, everybody else that's part of the decision making, that doesn't have some weight with them, and they say, well, maybe he should at the very least finish in our top 3. Like, according to this article, when they all wrote down on a piece of paper the 3 best candidates that they thought, Bill Belichick didn't make the top 3 on any of their ballots. Like, that to me was like mind-blowing. Like, I know he kind of stumbled in the last 5 years, but he's still the greatest, one of the winningest coaches of all time.
Okay, I just finished the Dynasty, and we know the great Dan Shaughnessy.
You watched all of them?
I did, and said this was
I heard Shaughnessy on your show last week.
Yeah, he was great.
He said that this was a
Bill
Kraft
Littlefield
production to make Kraft look as great as possible and stuff.
Yes.
And look, Belichick look as bad as possible, which it did, as he was grumpy during the whole thing. But, they had the whole Malcolm Butler thing. Malcolm Butler, great defensive player, had rescued the Patriots with catching interception.
Seattle Super Bowl.
Great defensive player, and they were getting crushed in the Super Bowl with the Eagles, correct?
Yes, that is
and
correct.
Malcolm Butler never played.
Correct.
And it would seem to me there'd be some obligation. I guess the story was he cleaned out his locker, something that ticked off Belichick or whatever it was.
I've heard varying stories, none of which I'll share on a hot mic.
Okay, well, I think there need to be some explanation of that. And
I don't know that he'll ever. I mean, maybe once Bill Belichick has moved on to a football heaven.
But if this guy's such a good
somebody,
if he's such a good defensive player, you know more than I do, obviously, they're losing in the Super Bowl because their defense is falling apart, wouldn't you put the guy in?
This was a big point of contention and has been a big point of contention. I mean, it almost cost him his job then. Like, Kraft in the Dynasty is so mad about that particular decision, but then I think they come back. I'm trying to remember the sequence of events. So that was 2018, I think, the 2017 season, 2018, because I believe that's when we were in Korea for the Olympics. I'm trying to piece them together. So the next time they come around, he devises this brilliant defensive game plan to beat the Rams.
Right.
But according at least to the Dynasty, when that happened, Jonathan Kraft had to talk his father into, the son, had to talk the dad into not getting rid of Bill Belichick because he was so mad about that. Listen, that is one of the things that people are dying to know what happened. And I don't know if Malcolm Butler will ever tell or Bill Belichick will ever tell or one will ever find out, but man, it's the one thing everybody wants to know.
He doesn't have to tell the exact thing, but close enough so people have some idea whether it was legit or not. But we can't solve that today.
By the way, for whatever it's worth, since you don't listen to sports radio, they've been talking about this every day for the last 7 years.
I know, but shouldn't there be some sort of hint at what happened?
I think we need a congressional investigation.
Okay, absolutely,
I do.
that's right. Get them all. Get the Marjorie Taylor Greene on top of it. Anyway, we're speaking
Moscow
with Trenni
Marjorie,
Casey, anchor reporter for NBC Sports
Good to
Boston,
see you, Trenni.
NPR
Hi,
contributor.
guys.
After the new news, we're going to be joined by the NAACP's Michael Curry. We're going to talk to him about the Supreme Court hearing about homeless encampments and what to do about them, and Ozempic and the economic divide it is causing. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Owens Corning of New England, helping homeowners create living space using the Owens Corning basement finishing system for over 20 years. More information at ocboston.com. Renowned actor, dancer, and singer Dule Hill tours America through the lens of creative expression and the transformative power of art. Don't miss the premiere of The Expressway with Dule Hill.
What matters to you. The 25 best Boston restaurants will be joined by Biplaw, Rye, and Kwaa of Dorchester's Comfort Kitchen. Then we'll get the latest on Trump's election interference trial with CNN's chief national correspondent, John King. Plus, we know the tolls on the Mass-New Hampshire border are off the table, but should they be on the table? Call or text us on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. A judge is expected to decide whether to hold former President Donald Trump in contempt for violating a gag order in his criminal hush money trial that's underway in New York City at this hour. Trump is accused of repeatedly violating the order, which prohibits him from attacking witnesses, jurors, and others involved in the case. The former president is facing 34 felony counts for allegedly falsifying business records to cover up hush money payments made ahead of the 2016 election, including to an adult film star. Protests against the war in Gaza have intensified on college campuses across the country. Students have been arrested at Yale, Columbia, and NYU. NPR's Jasmine Guards reports students at UC Berkeley and the University of Michigan have set up Gaza solidarity encampments.
The students say they want universities to disclose and end investments in weapons technology and Israel. One organizer, Soida, requested her last name be withheld due to fear of retaliation.
This is our tuition dollars that are going to the death and displacement through both fast and slow violence in Gaza through the genocide right now and the slower displacement throughout occupied Palestine.
As graduation approaches, students say they are committed to continuing the protests. At a congressional hearing last week, Columbia President Minouche Shafik condemned anti-Semitism. The organization Jewish Voices for Peace says at Columbia, more than a dozen of the students suspended for protesting are Jewish themselves. Jasmine Garst, NPR News, New York.
The Senate is on track to pass a $95 billion foreign aid package this week. The legislation contains assistance for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. NPR's Barbara Sprunt reports the expected vote comes 6 months after President Biden first requested the additional aid.
Over the weekend, the House passed a $95 billion supplemental spending measure providing aid for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. The package includes a measure that would authorize the seizure of billions in frozen Russian assets and would force the divesting of TikTok from its Chinese parent company or face a ban in the U.S. The measures passed with bipartisan support. It now goes to the Senate, replacing an earlier package in the chamber that passed several months ago. Barbara Sprunt, NPR News, Washington.
The city of Baltimore is taking legal action against the company that owns the cargo ship which crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge last month. A court filing accuses the owner of the ship of negligence, claiming the vessel was not fit to travel. This is NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. As we heard from our colleagues in Washington, officials at Harvard College have suspended the Harvard Undergrad Palestine Solidarity Committee, ordering the group to cease activities for the rest of the spring semester or risk permanent expulsion. It comes as a wave of pro-Palestine student demonstrations at universities grows nationwide. Interim President Alan Garber says that he won't rule out police response to the protests. Now, there There are just 2 days left in the semester at Harvard, and Garber's comment came after student protesters were arrested at Columbia, Yale, and New York University. Springfield Mayor Dominic Sarno making it clear that he wants MGM to keep running the city's casino. Last month, Bloomberg reported that MGM was looking to put its casino on the market, and the company's been silent on the issue. Sarno says the casino's been key to revitalizing the city's downtown, and he wants MGM to stay. But if the company does sell, Sarno says he has high expectations for any new operator.
There would have to be a brand and a vision that has the financial sustainability and the marketing aspects to continue to move the entertainment complex forward.
MGM and Encore in Everett are the state's only two full-service casinos. Both have reported growing revenues, with Encore posting its strongest month on record in March. Red Sox open a 3-game series at Cleveland tonight. We're at 59 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 35,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at betterhelp.com/public.
It's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you. We'll be back at the library.
Marjorie's applauding for herself again.
That's right. You have to vote for yourself and applaud for yourself.
If you don't, who will,
exactly.
Marjorie? Exactly.
We're going to be back here tomorrow and on Friday as well. And Congressman Bill Keating is going to zoom in. He's just been to Ukraine, so we can talk about what he saw there. May 3rd, we're going to do a special on-the-road broadcast, Jim, from UMass Boston over at the gorgeous on-the-water Dorchester campus.
And among other people, the governor will join us at UMass for an hour of Ask the Governor. We're joined now by Michael Curry. Michael's the president and CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors. He chairs their Advocacy and Policy Committee, and he said it was okay if I just mentioned he just came back from a vacation in Vietnam. Marjorie, here's a quiz for you.
Great pictures.
What did he do at 5 o'clock one morning while he's on vacation in Vietnam? What'd you do, Michael Curry?
I taught my New England School of Law class.
Oh, my God.
From Vietnam at 5 a.m.
That's called dedication. Plus, I didn't have anyone to take my place.
But you know what, though? I mean, think about that. That's a great thing. You can think it, not you want to do it at 5 o'clock in the morning, but you can be halfway across the world and still zoom in. It kind of opens up all sorts of possibilities. If I ever
when you're on the Cape during the summer, it'd be perfect. You can zoom into the show. I don't think so.
But everybody I know who's gone to Vietnam is just
it's phenomenal.
Loved it.
The history, of course, the war in Vietnam was one of the reasons I wanted to go, just to see from the ground, from their perspective. And then great food, great people.
Yeah.
I've never seen that many mopeds in my life. More mopeds than cars. Swarms of mopeds, but phenomenal experience.
Yeah, and you had that picture of you with the hat. That was
yes,
great.
with the hat, yes. It took a lot to get it home, too, with the overhead. And
yeah.
I took a lot, but I got
You're
it
looking
back.
pretty good in it, Michael Curry, let me tell you.
Thank you.
So let's start with the Supreme Court hearing on, this is out of this town in Oregon called Grants Pass, where I guess they have a homeless encampment, and they are upset about it. They've taken their case to the Supreme Court, and the court is weighing on banning of sleeping outdoors. It's obviously a relevant issue to every place, because a lot of places around the country have these encampments. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, one, it's interesting. I would encourage anyone who hears about Supreme Court's cases. There's a good friend of mine, Neil Shayette.
I know Neil Shayette.
Looking at the
law.
He would be all over this.
I didn't know you were friends.
Yeah, Neil and I talked a lot. God bless his soul. He passed away. He would come by the office over at the Mass League, and we talk about some of his the cases he'd look at. I mention it because if you're fascinated in any way about Supreme Court decisions, listen to an actual oral argument. Actually go online, and they have a little tab, and you can click on oral argument, whether it's an hour or two. This one was over 2 hours long. It's fascinating. It's complex. There's a lot of implications of a decision like this. It looks like the conservative majority of the Supreme Court was really favorable to this town and their position. This fine of $295 for fining folks who are homeless and in encampments within that community. It's concerning to me as a progressive person, as a person who's around advocate for civil rights, that people are homeless for a reason. People live on the street because there's no housing. People live on the street because they're dealing with conditions and circumstances. And yet we're penalizing, criminalizing homeless populations. We see it here in Boston, that population. We see it I was just in LA a few weeks ago. We understand that it's a problem. It's a public health concern, but criminalizing it is not the solution. And I think you heard from the more liberal Supreme Court justices that there's a better way. And they analogize this to many other things around breathing, right? The notion that breathing is something you do as naturally. Sleeping is natural. And how to sort of Latin phrase, reductio ad absurdum, reducing this to absurd. If you decide to take a nap on the street tomorrow and you say, I'm just going to sleep outside because I want to rest, I want to be under the sun. There's a lot of those arguments that you take in, but my major concern is the implications for the Eighth Amendment and the protections against cruel and unusual punishment. We've really evolved over the decades on how we look at the Eighth Amendment and how we go after abuses in crime, abuses in how we penalize young people who commit crimes. There's an implication of this decision that I'm really worried about.
By the way, a couple things. Speaking of listening to oral argument, I agree it's pretty thrilling. This Thursday, we will be carrying live the oral argument before the Supreme Court on the immunity claim of Trump, which would allow him, if he is successful, to not at least one, if not two of his cases, the federal cases, disappear. You know, one last thing on this homeless thing. I read a quote from Chief Justice Roberts and talk about nerve and lack of self-awareness. This is in the homeless case. Why would you think that these 9 people, meaning the justices, are the best people to judge those policy decisions? Now, you could say that about a lot of things. Maybe women's bodies might be a good example, but here it's inappropriate for the conservative majority to weigh in and let people be penalized for things that are no fault of their own.
That argument is selective.
It is selective. That is true.
I remember reading a while back that, obviously there's some people who suffer from mental illness, people who have drug addiction, but across the country, the cities with the highest cost of housing are also the cities with the highest numbers of homeless people, which would imply to me that a lot of these people aren't mentally ill, they don't have a drug problem, they can't afford a place to live, which in Boston is not at all surprising.
Yeah, I mean, again, I say this all the time. If people could have a home, they'd have a home, right? Most of them, right? But other than some mental health cases, many of them would prefer not to live on the street. They'd prefer to be in a warm environment and have access to what they need. We live in a city that we recognize, in a state we realize is a housing crunch. California, LA, housing crunch. Go across the country. And yet, as we force people into the streets because there's no housing, then we want to penalize them for staying. And then if you don't have an alternative for them to stay, what does that say about where we are as a country? So I'm deeply disturbed by this, but again, elections have consequences. It is a conservative court.
Yeah.
In June or July, we'll get the results of their decision, and it will almost likely be in favor of this town.
You know, speaking of criminalizing a behavior, every time we have a guest on who is in a position of authority, Attorney General, Governor, we ask why was the behavior of Ralph De La Torre, who drained tens of millions of dollars out of Steward Healthcare at the same time that equipment was repossessed that led to the death of their patients. Why has he not faced criminal charges? Well, that is still to be decided, I hope. There was a wonderful piece, I thought, written by David D'Alessandro, who most people remember as former head of John Hancock for years and years and years, basically writing in the Globe in an op-ed, and we're trying to get him, by the way, we hope we'll have him on next week, writing that this whole Steward thing was essentially like a Ponzi scheme on the part of De La Torre and others. What was your take on what D'Alessandro had to say?
Well, I thought it was an interesting article because I think you haven't heard that level of criticism. I mean, people have felt like Ralph basically was enriched by the decisions that were made when they were selling real estate, when they were not able to buy and pay for medical supplies, when they weren't able to do all the basic things you need to run a hospital. He did well. And the selling entity, this venture-backed entity, did well as well. So it raises the question of how do you hold people and how you hold organizations accountable to do what's right in the best interest of patients. And I'm stressing that because, again, this was the best interest of those investors and those venture capitalists. This was not in the best interest of patients. And I thought that article said, how do we now go after, the same way we went after Ponzi schemes, how do you now go after folks who set these organizations up to fail?
Well, he said it was like a Madoff kind of Ponzi scheme. Right. And, can I get back to the, I'm sorry to beat this drum to death. Let's assume, I think part of the problem is because Steward was such a huge operation, people don't make the connection. Let's have it smaller. So you run a business and you choose to take tons of money out of your small business. And you have customers, clients who are entrusted to you, in this case, patients. You can't do what the patient needs, and the reason you can't do what the patient needs is because of inadequate resources. One of the reasons for inadequate resources is because you basically drained all the revenue from your company. Yep. Wouldn't everybody say in a second, that CEO, that president, that executive director has some responsibility, probably criminal, for the death of a customer or client who you took into your care? I shouldn't have called it a customer. A patient has a totally different relationship with a hospital. And it seems to me there is almost, while everybody is standing in line to criticize him, people in power, I mean, Brian McGrory wrote these great pieces, former editor of the Globe, columns about the yachts and the jet planes. You should read them if you haven't. People in authority want to take the next step, which is to demand real accountability, which is either a return of his enrichment, which is what D'Alessandro is saying they should be done voluntarily. Yeah, hold your breath on that.
That's not likely.
Or criminal charges. I mean, don't you sense that there is you know what I think of? I know it's a horrible analogy, but I'm going to make it anyway because this drives me nuts too. I was talking to somebody about this the other night. I can't remember who. Like, we had discussions, I know with the governor, with Philip Eng, the head of the T. We now know who the guy was who knew that the rails on the Green Line extension were too narrow when they built them, allegedly didn't tell Charlie Baker. Let's assume that's true. How's he going to be held accountable? Nobody died, luckily. How's De La Torre going to be held accountable? And it seems the mantra is, let's move on kind of thing. Do you know?
Yeah, I've not heard let's move on, but I've heard that we did not anticipate this particular scenario, and we should have. So the reality is you build laws, the legislature passes legislation and laws, and they're implemented so that you can hold people accountable. We now, and I can say this having talked to several legislators, they're now thinking about what do they need to advance in this general court that now can address this situation so that we can hold someone like him accountable. The problem is if that didn't exist when this happened, then there may not be a direct way to go after him in the way that article.
But that's about financial reporting for the most part, is it not?
Right.
I mean, the question is, you take money out and you don't have money to take care of sick patients. It seems to me guilty as charged, but I'm not on the jury.
And I testified at Senator Markey's listening session, his hearing, and the whole notion was around for-profit. So as much as we love to have this capitalistic system where people can start a for-profit and compete, and then nonprofit. We have a nonprofit culture in this state. Nonprofit health plans for the most part, and hospitals. And it raised the question, when you let for-profit in and they can make decisions that are not based on the patient, what does that mean when they decide, hey, we're going to take the money out of this and run? And that's essentially what happened here.
So why did we do it? Because the Brigham, Mass General, I think the healthcare centers, those are nonprofits too, aren't they?
All nonprofits.
Yeah. So why did we think this was okay? Did we just not pay enough attention? Or?
Well, I think there was always concerns raised. But the reality is, we can be nonprofit leaning, but we can't be nonprofit exclusive. That's the conversation, is that do you allow some for-profits to come in? And of course we have. But then if you're going to allow them to come in and operate, how do you hold them accountable so that when you reach out to them and say, we want your reporting on your finances, they can't say, hey, you can't ask us, which is essentially what the Attorney General and others have been complaining about. The governor essentially says she wants them gone. And now we're looking at potential bankruptcy. So this is all stuff that you got to...
Steward gone.
Steward
gone, yeah.
You got to bake this in the beginning of the relationship to say, we want your reporting, we want you to be accountable. And then as I said to Senator Markey at his hearing, how do you build in some reserves some financing that if you decide to depart, you then can finance the transition that we need to go through.
Dilatory, by the way, didn't even show up at the hearing when he was invited by Warren and Markey, by the way.
We're talking to Michael Curry, CEO of the Mass League Community Health Centers and member of the NAACP Board of Directors. So, Michael, I can see why Biden is trying to shield patients' abortion records from the Republican Party, because I read the story from the Washington Post, and they talk about a woman who had a miscarriage, a medical receptionist in Ohio. She miscarried at home. She told the nurse when she went in for treatment, and the nurse called the cops. And then this Indiana Attorney General says he wants all terminated pregnancy records released to be on the public record. I had no idea things were not that bad, so I guess this is why Biden is doing this?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you almost are fighting in default, right? We lost Roe v. Wade. We know that Republican states, particularly across the South, are finding ways to curtail women's access to reproductive health, abortion services, all of those services that we care about and have been protected for a long time. And now the administration is thinking about ways that they can counter that through regulation, through the power that the president does have. And it's a bit of a chess game going on now. And he did that here. He's trying to make sure that women are protected. It is I don't know this part, and I have to kind of dig on this too, is if, knock on wood, if he were to lose the election, how much of that could be reversed by the next president?
What about HIPAA laws?
Yeah, I mean, protection, the ultimate protection that all of us who work in healthcare know is you have to protect people's private information. Right. But there are exceptions where under an investigation, they can tap into that and get that information.
Okay.
So essentially, this is the way to make sure that they can't get some of that critical information and then go after a physician or a patient who chose to have an abortion.
So, Michael Curry, you have been the leader, along with some of your colleagues, on health equity issues. We've talked about the Health Equity Compact that you founded with scores of other healthcare leaders of color. We talk about these issues almost all the time. It's a really interesting story about Ozempic and the issue of obesity, which obviously is epidemic in this country. And the beginning of the story is obesity is the biggest problem in low-income communities and communities of color, both of which, by definition, could most benefit from Ozempic. And as is often the way when one talks about any inequity, particularly health inequity, those who could most benefit from it are least able to access it because of cost. So what is to be done, if anything?
Well, one, I think it's an issue that I'm glad has come full circle, that we now talk about what causes communities to have obesity, and the reality is not having access to healthy foods is a critical part of that. The difference between a Roxbury and a Newton in terms of the supermarkets you have access to, the transportation you have access to, and a host of other things that make people obese. And I think the article points that out, and the conversations have been in all circles around health equity, the social determinants of health. Again, what is causing that obesity, which causes all these other implications of diabetes and so forth. So once you establish that that's the case, then there's these drugs that have now become available that people are thinking of them popularly as a weight loss drug, that if you can bring your weight down, will also decrease the risk that you'll have these adverse outcomes from a disease. They've not been affordable.
Yeah.
They've not been accessible. The quality issue is that doctors haven't always prescribed them and directed their patients, particularly Black, brown, poor patients, to those medications so that they could take advantage of the reduction in their weight to live healthier lives. None of this is new. Doctors have always described, I always mention here, and I've mentioned other places, unequal treatment, the 2002 Institute of Medicine report that pointed out that doctors treat patients differently. We talk about affordability, that depending on the incomes you have, the neighborhood you live in, healthcare becomes more affordable to you. If you look at the history of this country and the fact that some people have been relegated to poverty, no American history, some communities have not had a generation or two of evolving in our economic system in order to be able to afford some of these high-cost drugs. So it's a complication of a lot of things, but it is a health equity issue.
Yeah, but the thing I don't understand is if you're an insurance company or you're Medicare, and even if you don't give a damn about equity, it seems to me there's a strong economic argument to be made. Yeah. We know, you touch on this, the health outcomes that are attributable to obesity are endless. The list is endless. The cost to treat them is endless. So it seems to me, maybe naively, that if I'm an insurance company, I say, I want to spend the money up front, even though the drug is is very expensive, like $1,000 a month, even though, by the way, in Canada, it's like $100 a month, which is a whole other issue. Why don't insurance companies and Medicare, for example, see it in their own self-interest to make this medication available at low cost for people who do suffer from obesity?
I think that the critical point you made, and I testify at Health Policy Commission and other places, and I use a phrase that maybe I'll be known for. I said, pay now or pay greater later. Right? So the pay now or pay greater later is a cost issue, that if you invest in the right drugs, the right treatment, right place, right time, then people can live healthier and we won't see them in the emergency room or inpatient. It also means that if you can invest in the drug that person needs, they live a longer life. They're available to run our train systems and build our bridges and do all these things that we need in a workforce that we're struggling with. So the reality is we're not paying now in order to avoid paying later. The focus should be on access, and we need to, one, educate doctors on these are drugs that may save populations' lives, particularly your black and brown patients. And then two, the insurance companies need to make sure that they're prioritizing these drugs in a way that make them available. And cost. Cost has always been an impediment. You know the work that I do at the Health Equity Compact means if you can't afford the drug that will save your life, you won't take the drug because it's a choice of your rent, your food over that medicine. That should never be a choice.
So you, by the way, speaking of Health Equity Compact, I didn't mean to get into this today, but it just occurred to me. We're only a couple of months away from the legislature's 5-month vacation where they got to go home and do whatever they do. Is anything going to happen on this legislation that
How many
you
times
guys
have you heard that line?
So of course, any of us who do lobbying, legislative work will tell you that, you hope to get something done in a 2-year legislative session, but it's rare that you will see that. What we are seeing is people are pulling things off the tree. So we'll call that Health Equity Compact bill, the omnibus bill that we presented, the big bill with a lot of pieces. They're pulling pieces off. So I hope to see some pieces pulled off.
Like what?
The Health Empowerment Zone is a piece that we're excited about.
What is it?
So it's place-based initiatives. That means you identify an area like Roxbury or Worcester or Springfield where there are high rates of diabetes, cardiometabolic disease, and you go after those communities with resources, with social supports that will make that community healthier. We've not done that in a way, and Secretary Kate Walsh is excited about this concept. The governor and I have talked about this concept. The legislature seems excited. So I want to see stuff like that move. Data, if we can get the right data around health inequities, if we can have a dashboard to track where the disease is and how it's progressing within communities, then we can attack that disease. We don't do that very well here either. So I'm hoping those pieces get pulled off, but I'm going to say to you, Jim, I don't want a piecemeal approach to health equity. It's life or death. In the communities where I grew up, like Roxbury, people live 15, 20 years less. That should have never been acceptable. We should never have blamed communities for that. That is a product of history, of neglect, of abuse, and we can do something about it. That bill is an urgent call to this state to lead the nation again like we did with Chapter 15.
What's the website if people want to check out the work you and your colleagues are doing on this?
HealthEquityCompact.com, and credit to the 85 leaders of color who came together, and Lindsay Tucker, who leads our charge, former Associate Commissioner for DPH. We're doing some phenomenal work. There's a Health Equity Summit coming up. Go to the website.
When is that?
Second one in the nation in June. I think it's June 6th, 7th. And it will be a chance to have the state focus on health equity. We hope to have our legislative leaders, our regulatory leaders, and the public be there for the conversation.
Michael Curry, it's good to see you as always. Thank you so
thank
much.
You, thank
really
you very
much,
Michael Curry. We've been speaking with Michael Curry, President and CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers and a member of the NAACP's National Board of Directors, where he chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. Michael, thank you very much. And The Rule of Law is a great book. I'm learning a ton of stuff, including about Boston. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to talk climate and clean energy with Joseph P. Kennedy III and Joe Curtatone. They're here to talk about Kennedy's work leading a nonprofit group that provides low-cost energy to low-income families, and a lot about climate. They are next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
behind every headline
Massachusetts' 8th year in a row with more than 2,000 overdose deaths
is a human story.
Nobody's going to recover without a roof over their heads, whether it's transitional housing, sober housing is important.
Having a place where they can potentially be rescued should they overdose or even linked to treatment is an intervention that makes sense.
GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
Support for our programs comes from you. And the Hanover Theatre, presenting Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Directed by Bartlett Shear, Richard Thomas will play the role of Atticus Finch in this Broadway national tour, May 3rd through 5th at the Hanover Theatre. Tickets at thehanovertheatre.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Mass General Brigham Health Plan, with you every day. For more information, you can visit massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back at the library tomorrow. Friday, we're back at the library. Congressman Keating zooms in. He's just back from Ukraine. And May 3rd, we are at UMass Boston for a special show. The governor joins us for an hour, the newly installed chancellor, et cetera, et cetera. Joining us at the Boston Public Library, that was Joe Curtatone. He's president of the Northeast Clean Energy Council, and some say he was the former mayor of Somerville. Nice to see you, Mayor Curtatone.
Thanks, great to be here.
Alongside him, another familiar face, former congressman, now president of the Citizens Energy Corporation, Joe Kennedy III. Congressman, it's great to see you. How are you?
Mr. Browdy, a pleasure.
It's been a while.
It has.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you gentlemen, for coming in. So let's start with you. Do I call you Joe or do I call you Congressman?
Joe is just
Joe, okay.
I've been called
Joe,
worse, Marjorie.
Okay. So a lot of people around here remember the ads with your father, with the oil truck. He's got the hose. He's going down to the side of the house.
I've seen them.
Yes, that's right. That's what we think of as Citizens Energy, but you're doing something very different there now. Tell us what Citizens Energy is now.
So Citizens Energy is an organization that was founded by my dad over 40 years ago. And unique. It's a nonprofit parent that sits on top of a bunch of for-profit enterprises. We run those as a business, but the revenues flow up to a nonprofit parent. We give the money away, or a lot of it away anyway. So we support about 130 homeless shelters and food pantries across Massachusetts and Rhode Island, on top of a number of other legacy programs and projects. Most well known for that oil heat program that delivered across nearly over 25 states around the country. Now it's a diversified renewable energy company. So battery storage, microgrids, over 40 different solar fields around the country, including we're the largest low-income community solar developer here in Massachusetts, and high-capacity transmission lines. So we're building transmission lines across the country in a model that no one else actually does, and we give a big portion of those profits away to the communities that host that infrastructure. So over the course of the 40-plus years that Citizens have been around, we've given over $600 million back to low-income families and low-income communities, and that's poised to grow. So we're excited about it.
So in a related question, let me just stay with you, Joe Kennedy, for a minute. What's wrong with your uncle? Okay, we'll do that in a few minutes.
I was wondering how long.
I told you, watch out.
I was wondering how long it was going to take, Jim, and it was actually longer than I expected.
Okay, we'll get back to that in a couple of seconds. Joe just answered one of the questions I was going to direct to you, since you sort of run the trade group for all these wonderful clean energy entities, many of which you've brought to the show, which we appreciate. Is anybody else doing, it's so obvious what the need is here. Is anybody else doing what they're doing there at Citizens Energy?
Theirs is unique. They're actually one of the most innovative companies, and you can see how they've evolved to what they're focused on now, from solar and storage and microgrids and transmission lines. We've talked about that, the critical need, the thing that doesn't get really heralded enough. But I want to just say something else. Citizens Energy at its core is really about leading with energy equity, going back to their founding, that no matter what your income level, your status, where you are, that you have equitable access to energy, in this case, clean energy, but also really putting the investment back into the community as well. And it's really a unique model. I don't know of any other organization that is like them.
But one of the things I worry about when we were reading about the update, and I knew your father a bit and was around at the formation, and it was just an incredible thing. It was much needed. The private sector can't do this, on its own. The reality is the need is so immense. So is there a partnership with the government, which it seems to me ultimately has to bear the greatest brunt of this, no?
So yes and no. There's obviously ample opportunities for partnership, and we're an example of that. That being said, Jim, candidly, I wouldn't let the private sector wholly off the hook here, right? I mean, the projects that we have the largest low-income community solar program in the entire nation, a 39 megawatt solar farm in the Imperial Valley, so down near the border.
What does 39 megawatts mean in terms of what it can power?
It's that field provides 12,000 low-income households with about $200, $300 a year off their energy bills, which for 12,000 low-income households along the border in Mexico it's a big deal, right? And it's 100% renewable energy. So it's a meaningful amount of, it's a meaningful subsidy, and it's meaningful in terms of also helping bridge this divide that we have talked about before that is salient in places like Massachusetts, where we've got a robust environmental activist community, which is right, and we need to have them pushing. But also legacy industries here, small manufacturers, right? The manufacturing industries that powered our old mills in the Fall Rivers and the Lowells and the Lawrences and the Springfields, where energy cost is a big issue for their businesses, where you can hire somebody for $50,000 a year, but if those energy rates go up 2 or 3 cents, you're putting people out of business. And so we need to find ways to bridge that gap. Citizens has found a way to do that, working, yes, with government, but also with private sector partners that are willing to actually make that investment where they actually do business.
Yeah. For people like me who don't really understand how this works, if you have a big solar field, how does that wind up solving the problem of people who are hooked up to that field in terms of their electricity?
So there's a couple of different ways that the solar aspect works. And most of our solar farms are in places where there's significant government subsidies for these projects, right? And so there's tax credits that are put out by the government to provide an incentive to develop these farms. We develop them, and then we're kind of industry leaders in terms of the amount of credits that we give back to low-income households to try to make sure that that they can afford what is oftentimes higher cost energy than, as Mayor Curtatone and I were discussing earlier, a heavily subsidized fossil fuel industry. Marjorie, the kind of project that we have, the model that we have that is, I think, differential by orders of magnitude is a transmission model, because the solar farms that we have are great, but when we're talking about the need to generate 2, 3, 4, 5 times the amount of electricity we currently generate in this country in order to meet our electrification needs to stave off climate change, you need to move those electrons, right? You can't generate all of them in the places that you're going to use them.
Yeah.
The environmental justice movement was about saying, hey, you can't just build this stuff and railroad it down, site it in low-income communities of color that don't have a political voice. You have to compensate them for it because they're bearing a cost for all of us. So what we've been able to do is create a model whereby they get significant economic resources. We cut a deal in California, Jim, where Citizens Energy, our little nonprofit, will give away close to $450 million over the course of the next 30 plus years to communities in Central California, right? By one project alone.
Can you weigh in, Joe Curtatone, as someone who spent a lot of time in government, obviously as the mayor of Somerville, on this whole government responsibility versus, as Joe Kennedy said, you shouldn't let private sector off the hook deal?
No, I agree. I don't think we should let them off the hook, but I think collectively it has to be a collaboration. Citizens Energy is not just doing innovative work. They can be a template in what that collaboration looks like, some of the projects they're working on. Look, if we leave it only on the private sector, what's going to happen is they're going to force it onto the ratepayer. We will fail. Costs will go up. We're going to lose trust. We need to earn trust and credibility if you want to move this transition rapidly and equitably to full electrification. We are already, again, the fossil fuel industry is already the most subsidized industry in our existence. Government we have a long history right here. We fund infrastructure, and we start treating a lot of this work as critical infrastructure that delivers on economic impact, but lead with the values and sort of the template like Citizens Energy has formed. We're going to earn trust, we're going to deliver, we're going to keep costs down. So yeah, we shouldn't let the private sector off the hook, but we shouldn't let the public sector either, because there are a lot of times where regulation has also fallen behind, which is creating greater risk, greater costs. So that's something I think we should pay attention to.
Joe Kennedy, you mentioned transmission a couple of minutes ago, and Joe Curtatone brought in the COO of Hydro-Quebec, a month or two ago, and we were talking, I'm going to get lost here, so you'll rescue me in a second, but there were a couple of transmission lines, one worked out, and the whole notion was when you have excess capacity in one place, you ship it to another place, and when they have it and you need it, it's shipped back. You were in a partnership with National Grid that fell apart in terms of that transmission. Why did that fall apart?
So, Jim, transmission lines are hard to build. They're big, they're expensive, there's a lot of uncertainty there. And we're really excited about the partnership with National Grid. We hope there's still opportunities here, but the part where I'd start orienting you on this is the number of proposals for transmission lines from New England to Canada has a long history of proposals that have failed for a variety of reasons. Part of the challenge there is they are so expensive. Part of it is siting, and I would tell you that the project that Twin States that we were engaged with in National Grid, roughly 60% of that line went over existing right-of-way. The other part was going to be buried to try to accommodate the needs of communities to try to minimize the impact for communities adjacent to that line. Those costs go up, which then also means that the challenges that you have in terms of in what you need in order to make the project pencil go up, and that uncertainty goes up. Part of the genius of that line and what we were excited about was that it was bi-directional. So when there was excess capacity in Canada, you could ship electricity down to New England. When we had an offshore wind industry that was robust and growing, particularly in the winter, we could send that electricity back up to Canada. That offshore wind industry has gotten delayed for at least a couple of years. That creates uncertainty because if your project finances rely on being able to send electricity in both directions, but now all of a sudden that offshore wind grid isn't going to be developed for several more years. Now all of a sudden you're asking those developers to bear that risk without making those costs so high to pass it on to customers. All of a sudden you've got a whole lot of uncertainty here, to say nothing of procurement issues and supply chain issues and deadlines in construction. So what you heard National Grid say was, it doesn't work right now, it's not viable right now. It's not to say it's not viable, but it's not viable right now. This region desperately needs more transmission, and we are excited about the prospects to leverage the model that we have to try to make sure that communities adjacent to that infrastructure are compensated without, and this was critical here for what the mayor said, without turning those costs over to having ratepayers bear that burden.
Should I read into that you weren't happy with the National Grid?
We love our potential partners here. We were disappointed that project won't go forward. We understand the business dynamics around this. We're looking forward to exploring other opportunities to making sure that customers in New England have the electricity that they need at prices that we can afford.
Why is he smirking when you're answering?
Because none of
that
us are
question?
happy. I mean, I can say, and full disclosure, I have National Grid on my board. They don't run our agenda, but we weren't happy either. But it's understandable. It is frustrating because look at the whole story around the offshore wind procurement in the first round. Those PPAs, those power purchase agreements, were executed in 2019. And in over 5 years, what did we expect the cost to stay the same? And we had a pandemic, global wars, and volatile interest rates. So it's a reset. So I'm hopeful. Keep our fingers crossed. That is a great project, and the opportunity for the bilateral benefits is something we really need to lean into.
Go ahead.
We're talking to Joe Kennedy, former congressman, as you know him, and also now the president of the of Citizens Energy Corporation, and Joe Curtatone, former mayor of Somerville, president of Northeast Clean Energy Council. You know, we talk a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act, Joe Curtatone. Is there anything in there that involves low-income stuff?
Absolutely. I think, just the news the other day about what Mass Solar for All received, $156 million, part of the $7 billion that came out of the Inflation Reduction Act to really for low-income households to expand solar access. Again, equitable opportunities for energy access, clean energy access. So that was huge, and we're starting to see that amongst many other things, the payoff for the IRA. And I mean, we're going to see the energy benefits and the access to that energy, but we're going to see the economic benefits. They're going to really help out many suppliers, manufacturers, small businesses involved in that industry.
Do you want to say something, Joe, about that?
I'm sorry?
I thought you were going to say something about that.
Oh, so look, I think there's a lot in there in the IRA trying to target incentives into low-income communities. Part of that is structural, so the extension of investment tax credits, the ability to translate that investment tax credit that was there for solar and wind over to battery storage, so that battery storage, Jim, as you know, is a huge asset, particularly for renewables, because there's times, particularly in places like Boston, where the sun don't shine and the wind don't blow, and so we got to store that energy in order to make that grid reliable. There's $27 billion that were set up in a series of funds to actually help fund that transition, particularly for lower income communities, that without that additional support would be the ones that would be left behind because they don't have the dollar. Like heat pumps, they've gotten cheaper, but they're still expensive. They're particularly expensive for low income families where you have to choose between, saving for something or a heat pump. If you have to make that choice, that might not be the first thing you pay for.
You know, Joe Kennedy, can I stay with that family for a second? Marjorie mentioned the ads that we all remember, Joe for Oil, when your father got off the truck or some damn thing, whatever the hell he was doing.
He's pulling the hose, Jim.
It was a freighter, an oil tanker coming.
Yeah,
he took the whole supply chain, from the freighter to the truck to the tanker to the hose to the house.
I'm sure he did.
Every step of the way.
Fine, okay.
There you go.
So what is in those days, you called Joe for Oil.
Yep.
So you're an individual. Forget the larger entities you're dealing with, and you need help. What do? Is Citizen Energy, can they help those?
Ready
I mean,
for
a
this one?
renter for,
Ready
go
for
ahead.
this one? Joe for Son.
No, is that really true?
Joe for Son.
Call the sun for sun.
I like that.
So someone calls
S-U-N.
Okay, we know how to spell
Oil-
sun. Thank
Very
you.
clever. I like it.
So what happens when they call? What happens?
So we have a series of solar farms across the state. There's some residency issues and whatnot, but people call up. So 800 Joe for Son. They call up, they'll get to one of our centers and talk to somebody about the opportunities to sign up and enroll in a community support program. And we've got a series of them all across the state. Again, we're the largest provider of low-income community solar across Massachusetts. We've got about 2,200 households in Massachusetts and New York. And we're building more solar fields dedicated to low-income households.
That must be a number 4. Is it a number 4?
Yes.
Okay.
It's still Joe for Oil, Joe for Son.
1-800 Joe for Son.
There you
Okay,
go.
number 4.
How about that?
What's the website for your operation, too, if people want to check it?
CitizensEnergy.com.
Citizens. So now, can I change the topic?
Yes, only I will tell you the last time we actually spoke. Do you remember when that was?
You and I?
Yes.
No.
The last time I spoke with both of you, I was walking down the street in Western Massachusetts with Jim McGovern.
Oh, of course, he called in,
that's right. Yes.
And you guys were praising him for, once again, walking 50 miles across his district.
McGovern.
Jim McGovern, walking 50 miles over Thanksgiving and his birthday, year after year, to raise money for the Greater Western Food Bank. I pointed out to you that for all of those years that he's done it with a radio show host that is pushing a radio transmitter in a shopping cart in costume. So next year, if you guys want to do your show from the road,
okay.
For those of you that care about low-income families, care about hunger, believe in Jim McGovern,
we do.
We'd love to have you there.
Okay,
I got the costume.
Okay, fine, I'm sure you do. So let's go back. I think everybody here or watching or listening saw a pretty powerful event the other day when your father and a bunch of the siblings of Robert Kennedy Jr. Stood up and powerfully endorsed Joe Biden. I know you introduced him at another event that was part of that thing. Give us a little back. I mean, what was that like? I mean, almost everybody went out of their way to say we love our brother, we love our uncle, we love our. What's going on here?
Jim, I'm going to start where you did, which is I love my uncle. I believe that there are certain values and viewpoints that are important for a president to have. And I believe that the most important candidate we have at the moment that has a chance to win is Joe Biden. And I enthusiastically support him. And I think I have deep disagreements with my uncle. There's plenty of people I love that I don't think should be president of the United States. He happens to be one of them. And so I will, and our family is doing everything we can to try to make sure that Joe Biden is reelected for not just the good of administration, but for the good of our country, our people, and our planet.
How hard was this for your father, your uncles, your aunts? I mean, how hard is this?
As you know, Jim, I don't speak for other members of my family because we got a big family. Yeah. But I will tell you, as you both know, and I think plenty of your listeners do, we've been through a lot. We've been through some good times, and we've been through some not so good times. And the one lesson I have always taken from my family is that no matter what, there's something you can fall back on, right? However good or bad things go, you got to rock, and that is family. And so for us to be put in a position where we have to make this choice is not something that anybody wants, clearly. But we also understand the consequences of this election. We understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were to get back into office. I take him at his word for what he says about being a dictator on day one, about trying to eradicate a clean energy industry, about what it means for democracy, about what it means for people that care about our country, our people, and our planet. And if you believe that, then you don't really have much of a choice. And you saw what my aunts and uncles and my dad did last week, and very difficult but necessary.
One last question on this, and then you'll I know you'll breathe a sigh of relief.
I don't believe it's one last question.
For you. For you, I'm not asking you to speak for your family members.
Yeah.
Do you speak to your uncle?
I maintain contact with him, yes.
You do? And do you talk to him about his positions on some of these issues and what you believe he may cause to happen in this country?
Jim, as you can imagine, I'm going to keep conversations with family members private. I will tell you that, look, I care a lot about my uncle. I care about my cousins. I care about his kids. I care about our family. I also, I am concerned as to what his candidacy might do for this country. I'm also concerned on a personal level what that candidacy is likely to mean for him, his wife, and his kids. Politics is not a joke these days, and it is hard. It is ugly. It is mean. It is personal. And the impact of what that's going to mean, I think for them, is something that I wouldn't wish on anybody.
On that note,
Thank
800
you.
Joe for Son.
Joe
Is
for
that
Son.
correct?
Number-
Joe for Son.
Joe for Son.
And how do they find your operation there, Mayor Curtatone?
The NECEC, well, they're a member.
No, I know, but if they want to check out your trade group,
www.necec.org.
You got to look
Or
at
just call
somebody to
Joe
make
from
sure.
Somerville. Call Joe from Somerville. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, maybe you should change that, Joe for Somerville.
We look forward to seeing you out in Western Mass over Thanksgiving.
That's right.
Honest to
Walking
God,
I think it'd be
on
there.
our honor, we will be there.
How about
Is that
that?
a deal?
You heard
We
it here
will be
first.
there.
Are you going to be in the carriage? I'm going to pull
I'll be in the carriage. You
No,
push
I'll
me.
be pulling it.
Hold him to
The
it.
congressman said he'd push me too, so you
I-
can take
happily.
turns. I'm sure
Happily.
you will.
Okay. Thank you
Joe
both
and
very
Joe,
much
thanks.
for
It's
coming
great
in.
to see you both.
Great to
Thanks
see
so
you both.
much.
Great to see you, Congressman. We're speaking with former Congressman and now President of Northeast Clean Energy Council, Joe Kennedy III. 800 Joe for Son. Also, Joe Curtatone, former Mayor of Somerville and now President of Northeast Clean Energy Council. Thank you both again for coming in. After a quick break, finalists for the James Beard Foundation's coveted Best New Restaurant Award. They are here with food.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by, I think, two of the hottest people in the restaurant industry. Biplaw, well, you are. Biplaw Rai. I wouldn't have said that a year ago, let me tell you. Kwaa of Dorchester's Comfort Kitchen, now a finalist for the National James Beard Foundation's Best New Restaurant in America. By the way, when these guys were on the first time,
They hadn't
and we said,
opened
when are
yet.
you going to open?
Yeah.
Soon. When are you going to open?
Soon.
Soon. When are you
Yeah.
going to open? Well, not too far in the future.
Yeah.
Finally, they did it with a bang. And by the way, they've also got a pop-up event this Saturday, the 27th, at Curio Spice Company in Cambridge, another great place. For information and reserve tickets, go to comfortkitchenbos.com. Biplaw, Kwasi, it's great to see you both. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so the James Beard finalists, thing, this is a big deal. I mean, these are restaurants all over the country. As Jim said, we were suspicious. We began to think that these guys are never going to get going, and they finally did. So you went from like 0 to 100 here in like a year. Kwasi, how did it happen so fast?
Absolute tenacity.
Yeah?
We have an amazing team, and we've always we're going to push no matter what, and we've always just been like, we're going. And we went.
And it's the two of you with your spouses
Yes.
as well, right? So you
And others, right?
And others,
And
but,
others, yes.
but that's intense with your spouses.
Yeah, it is.
You better get along.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't do without them, for sure.
Yeah.
It's really been a humbling experience for us. Our first year, we got all these awards, accolades, and for a new restaurant, it's unheard of. But also for people that are listening right now, there's few things behind the scene, which is the complexity of running a restaurant. Right? Even with these success, just on average, running a restaurant is a difficult business. Its profit margin are anywhere from 3 to 7, or maybe 10, depending on type of restaurant. And first year, great, but still there's lots of challenges,
Well, give us some examples of the things. I mean, I'm so glad you say this, because all we've read about you guys since you opened like a little more than a year ago is award after award, after 5-star rating, after 5. Tell us some of the challenges
And
you
then we
guys
want to
face
hear
year
about
end.
the food, because
Believe
that's
me, we
really
do, yes.
very
Yes,
important.
I mean, one of the biggest challenges is just keeping the team together. And we've grown out of our space within 1 year. We've got great, talented people in the team. So just to keep this train moving, it's difficult. And we're learning every day that things are different. Pandemic definitely, had changed the scene. So running a restaurant is not like it used to be 10 years ago.
Is government standing in the way in the city, or does it help you do what you're doing?
City has been great, but I think it would be very helpful for the city to step in even more.
And do what?
To provide help where it's needed. So, for instance, liquor license. Without liquor license, we wouldn't be where we are today. And, there's lots and lots of data coming out of that. So just giving a liquor license to any restaurant that opened in a city would be my go-to. Why?
Because they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
And the state legislature limits the availability, even though it's none of their damn business. But statutorily, they have the right to do this. Can you, I want to go back a bit. We're acting like everybody knows about the place.
Yeah,
and a lot of people do.
The food.
First of all, you guys, High Rise is where you met? Is that what you told us?
Yes, the bakery.
Okay, a century ago. Okay.
Yes.
Tell us about the space before you moved. What was this space that you now occupy in Upham's Corner? What was it before you guys?
Yeah, it was a comfort station that was providing
comfort
yeah. for the trolley lines that used to be there. And, I make this joke all the time. The first time I went to the space, I looked at Biplaw and was like, hey, man, you sure about it?
It was a bathroom, public bathroom,
It was a public bathroom. But, in reality, the space has been transformed in a way that it looks amazing right now. And we're able to essentially invite people into our pseudo living room, if you would.
How's that feel? I mean, a year in, how does it, other than the challenges Biplaw mentioned and that sort of stuff, how's it feel to have, basically, forget the awards for a second, just to be as accepted and praised by your most important people, the customers? How's that feel after all this?
It's amazing. Amazing. There's so many full circle moments happening at Comfort Kitchen, and to be able to work with friends and family in this journey has been very amazing and humbling all at the same time.
Okay, so Marjorie wants to talk about the food.
Well, I do, because I was reading this morning, and I'm really glad you brought some food, because I've been really waiting to eat it. This rice bowl, which sounds wonderful, and you mentioned that you don't like okra, and then you
Until I came to your place, I think I told you this, okra is the slimiest stuff I've ever seen in my life. I ordered it because I felt I had an obligation to myself to do it. It is almost like a different vegetable than I thought. It's unbelievable.
And it's a lot of it is different food that it's certainly not American cuisine. I mean, you guys are both immigrants, so this is food that maybe a lot of us would never have eaten before.
So tell us about the food, Kwasi.
So, our whole menu concept, we're providing global comfort food, right? From the lens of the African diaspora and how it connects to the maritime spice trade. Essentially food that has traveled through immigration, whether voluntary or involuntary. So you bring up the okra dish. And our menu concept too, when we're developing the menu, it's not just me in a basement somewhere just writing stuff up. We're talking about it because there is so much immigration in the world and so much immigration in this country as well. The immigration, from my personal perspective, is what makes America what it is. Mm-hmm. So when we're developing menus, we're always talking about, hey, what was your favorite food? And that okra dish was very much,
oh my God.
It's very indicative of what Comfort Kitchen is about, because we were sitting there, it's like, oh, I really love okra, but people hate okra. And it's just like, all right, how do we, and I remember Biplaw's mom, actually, we were talking to Biplaw's mom, and she's like, oh, in Nepal, there was this dish.
Which is where you're from, Biplaw.
Correct.
And you're from Ghana.
Yes. And we talked about the street food okra dish. It's like, okay, how do we make this awesome and put it on the menu? And that conversation is always where we're at when we're talking about our food.
So what'd you bring, Biplaw? We're about to bite into that. Marjorie's in waiting. What are we eating?
I'll let Kwasi explain.
Okay, Kwasi, what are we eating?
That is the jackfruit sliders.
Yeah.
The jerk jackfruit sliders. So last time we were here, we brought the jerk duck.
Yes, you did. That was delicious too.
And the jackfruit sliders are giving the duck a run for its money. It's totally vegetarian. We marinate jackfruit in our jerk marinade that we make at the restaurant for 24 hours, and then we roast it. And then it has this kind of almost pulled pork or pulled chicken consistency. And we pair it with some coriander aioli, some pickled onions.
The reason I'm smiling is if you're not watching on youtube.com/GBH News, you don't get to see Kwasi smiling as he's describing all these incredible foods.
I don't want
to
to insult anybody, but Deborah First, I think, did a better job describing the okra here. When she said it was seared in brown butter and stacked vertically, the pods are crisp and tender, a charming complement to their grassy flavor, served over masala spiced yogurt with crisp plantain crumbs sprinkled on top. Oof. That is a great description for what they sound like.
5 stars, too, by
And then
the
you
way.
got this Basque cheesecake with orange blossom caramel, pistachio, cardamom. I've been reading this all morning, starving to death, waiting for these guys to get here. Or pistachio, cardamom, ice cream and stuff. You got stuff that, I don't know. What's Basque cheesecake?
Basque cheesecake, so it's not your average cheesecake where it's very, cream cheese based. So it's almost like a burnt, I don't want to use the word burnt, but like you char the crust very much so, and the cheese itself is very light. So when you think of cheesecake, you're thinking of this very rich, heavy, but the Basque cheesecake is very light, and it's a very North African, Mediterranean kind of concept towards a cheesecake.
Biplaw, there was a lot of talk right before you guys opened and right after you opened as well about what the presence of this restaurant might do to Upham's Corner. What has this restaurant done to its surrounding community, do you think? You've only been open a year plus in the time you've been there.
Yeah, some data point is we get a lot of customers coming from various parts of Massachusetts. Cambridge, even locally, and then we have people from Rhode Island, New York, traveling, so it's really bringing focus in Dorchester. And Dorchester is a very diverse and it's a big neighborhood, and I don't think Dorchester gets the shine that it deserves, whether it be food, culture, sports, and Comfort Kitchen is just part of this big ecosystem that we are really bringing light to Upham's Corner, the focus being Upham's Corner, which was designated as cultural district in 2015 by the city. So there's a lot of new developments happening. We are aware of the change. One thing that really brings, or when reporters are talking to us, is gentrification and how we are either aiding it or are we responsible for it. And my answer to that really is gentrification started back in the 60s. We're seeing the final effect of it. And there's really not much we can do, but what we can do is we can do a truthful storytelling to really reflect the local culture, the diverse population that we have, and then reflect it on our food.
I know it's not monolithic, but community members who live in the surrounding area, what kind of reception have you gotten, Biplaw?
Great, just awesome. I mean, just another data point is there has never been a cafe or a sit-down cafe in the entire stretch of Columbia Road that we are on, which is 2 to 3 miles if you start from Mass Ave all the way to Franklin Park. Not even Dunkin' Donuts.
That's incredible.
Wow.
So why does Dorchester not deserve a gathering space?
Yeah.
Well,
why has it been left out?
Talk about the liquor license thing. Maybe you could tell us, or either one of you can tell us about the process of getting a liquor license, because I know that's been something that politicians from Dorchester, Roxbury, and Madison have been talking about for ages, that all these restaurants here in the Back Bay, it can spend $400,000 to get one of these licenses.
City Councilor Ayanna Presley used to talk about this all the time too. But
Yep. Tell us about the difficulty getting that.
It's extremely hard, next to impossible if there's a new restaurant opening in Dorchester, Roxbury, Hyde Park right now to get a license. The only way to get a license is 2 ways. One is either to buy it, which are close to $500,000.
Yeah, $500,000. How are you supposed to do that if you're starting a restaurant?
Or what? Run for office.
Thank you.
Or you would have to do what most restaurants do, is to apply for permits and all that, and that itself it's not guaranteed. one great example is Gordon Ramsay. If you don't know who
Famous.
he is, yes, very famous
Yeah.
chef, was able to buy the last remaining liquor license in Roxbury from a little bar, and it went to Seaport. So who gets to decide these?
Yeah.
Do we need a chef from LA coming here, spending millions of dollars and taking licenses and going to different neighborhood? So, big questions.
So Kwasi, how'd you get yours?
Our liquor license? Oh man,
You didn't run for office.
Yeah, I didn't. I did not run for
You didn't win the lottery.
It's a complex web of even how we got it. We were very lucky at the very last minute.
Yeah.
And I would really like to know who is vouching for us at that table.
Oh, great. Okay.
And we didn't get it, and we got it. But if we didn't have it, we wouldn't be here today.
And
by the way, we
think
should.
And
that's
talk
one of
about
the
liquor.
things-
Talk about liquor in terms of what it
And
means
margin,
to
yeah,
the
exactly.
the margins.
That's what I was gonna say. I think most folks don't understand how much a liquor license is important, especially to a small
Yes.
restaurant. It's like the profit margins are small to begin with, and without a liquor license, it's almost impossible to survive. So for us, we were very lucky, very wow, okay.
Okay, I want to read
Wait,
one more thing.
oh.
Spiced eggplant roasted into complete and tender submission.
She's
Tahini
about the
pooling
food. I like
over
it.
its craggy surface and a bed of Moroccan-inspired couscous underneath. I mean, how great does this sound? This is a great story.
That's from the Globe. But so,
The
by the way,
Globe,
you
Deborah
guys have a
first.
daytime deal going on now too, right? Is that not true? You're not. What do you do during the daytime?
So last year we opened from Monday through Saturday for cafe service from 8 to 3. It really wasn't successful. So we switched hours, and now we are opening from Thursday through Sunday. for
Why
cafe
was it
service.
not successful?
Again, Upham's Corner, it doesn't have a foot traffic that we need. It will get there in probably 4 or 5 years. But Thursday through Sunday, we do get neighbors. I think people in Upham's Corner are visiting cafes during weekends and not so much in weekdays.
So what is it? I mean, your place is packed. It's really hard to get a reservation. I'm not discouraging people, but it is really hard. So what's the value of this beard thing? For people who don't know, I think we're one of the restaurant capitals of America. If I'm right, there are only 2 restaurants, one in Cambridge and you guys. Tallulah, is that the name of the thing? I've never been there in Cambridge. And you guys who made it into the finals from the whole city, nobody else kind of thing. What does that do for, other than the pride, I assume you feel, which you should, what does it do for the business, Mr. Businessman here, Biplaw? What does that do? Well, he is. I mean, he's
So James Beard, what's a lot of people say it's like the Oscars
It is.
of restaurant industry.
You're going to be humble now?
So.
You're not going to be humble, are you?
No.
Be clear. Okay, go ahead.
No, not. So it definitely has put us on the map, so to say. We are representing actually the whole of New England, Northeast. So it's very humbling for both of us and the entire team. I mean, we could, in our wildest dreams. What does it do? I think the big question is it really converting into customers?
Right,
coming
exactly.
in?
That's my question. Does it?
It does. It does. And it has its own challenges too. People that read James Beard and come to a restaurant versus people reading Boston Globe and coming to a restaurant is very different.
How so?
I think there's pressure definitely on us and definitely on James Beard nominated restaurants to function at certain quality. And, to do that, every day is a game day for us.
But wait a second. But I've known you guys casually for quite a while now. You felt that before James Beard nominations, did you not? I mean, the way you speak, it's pretty obvious how important the quality of your work is to you, Kwasi.
The quality is always at the forefront for us, no matter what, James Beard or not. For us, is every time we step out, we're putting the best product forward, the best service forward, no matter what, right? But James Beard, definitely that adds an extra layer of pressure that's just like, all right.
Yeah, can I go back to what Marjorie said at the beginning?
What did I say?
How you two how long you known each other?
Oh, yeah.
How long you know each other?
Since 2008-9.
How you getting along, honestly?
So, like any partnership, it's there's a lot of work, our internal work that we do as a individual, And how do we get along? I think we get along well.
Do you fight?
I mean,
do you fight?
Of course.
Of course.
Absolutely.
You do? And how do you deal with that? You're saying, of course. How do you deal with that?
No, but I mean, we fight, we sit back, we talk about it, and then we resolve it.
I think there's something in Biplaw's laugh that
Yeah.
you're not sharing with us.
It's okay.
How do you resolve what are you thinking that you're not saying?
We go back and talk to our wives.
That's
That's actually the best.
They're the mediators
like,
in
hey.
this kind of thing.
So, Kwasi, tell me how you learned to cook. You guys were at High Rise Bakeries, great famous bakery over there in Cambridge. That's a bakery. How'd you get all the rest of this stuff?
So I ended up at High Rise trying to pay for college.
Okay.
And my now wife, then girlfriend,
Okay.
was working at the front of the house.
Uh-huh.
And she said, oh, they're looking for a sandwich maker / dishwasher. I was like, I'm game, let's go.
Okay.
And then I ended up working at High Rise for almost 6 years. So I started doing sandwiches there, and then I ended up going to run the kitchen for 3 years.
But they weren't cooking food from Ghana there. were
No,
they?
no. But
Was this your parents, your grandparents? Was this just stuff you remembered as a kid, or what?
to be honest, I wish I could give a more complex answer than that. I just needed a job. And the truth is, once I got to High Rise, I really enjoyed cooking.
Okay.
I found out I enjoyed cooking at High Rise, and from there, I left college to cook full time.
You did.
Okay, can we spend the last minute or two? This is going to be on you, Kwasi, it appears. Tell us about a couple more dishes that knock people's socks off that in all likelihood virtually none of us have had if we didn't have it at your joint.
Ooh, okay.
Couple.
Yasser chicken, for sure. One of the things that we're always trying to find is the linear, or not the intersectionality of food, right? Yasser chicken is your idea of a lemon chicken, if you would.
Oh.
But it's a very West African, style of cooking, where it's a slow stewed chicken. We have the trout on the menu that's very Mediterranean. So, from outwardly looking in, the menu looks like it's drawn from so many different parts, which it is, but there's a very much of a connectivity that's happening there, because we're trying to celebrate not only ingredients, but cook methods that have traveled around the world. And, I use the momos, for instance, dumplings. You find dumplings all around the world.
Yeah.
Ravioli, you name it. It might be called different things, but you find it everywhere. And those are the things that we're always trying to highlight.
Well, by the way, the food is just just spectacular and different, and the place is welcoming. It's just great. Before you go, though, I want to end where we began. Did you guys doubt that this was ever going to... When I was joking, I wasn't joking. I wasn't sure this is going to happen. And by the way, I kept texting one of you after you're on the show, said it's going to happen 2 more weeks. This is going to happen 3 more weeks. And were you nervous, Biplaw, that this was never going to come to pass?
No.
You just felt it was a matter of when?
Absolutely. The team, the dedication, and we've been working on this even before 2019. This has been a conversation that's been going on. I see time there, so I'm going to take this time to do some appeal work here.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Okay.
Go ahead.
So we're going to James Beard Awards in June 9th. We are taking 8 of our leadership team. So without them, we wouldn't be there.
Great.
And as a small business, people listening on the radio, anyone that has a connection to JetBlue, Delta, we would love to get some sponsorship and represent Boston.
How do they find you?
info@comfortkitchenbos.com.
Info@comfortkitchenbos.com. We are really thrilled for your success.
Congratulations.
It's really...
And the food is wonderful. I got to get my rear end
It's
down
huge.
there.
It's great.
Yeah.
Good to see you both, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Very quickly, say the other partners, by the way. Say the other people you
So
mentioned.
Nyako Perry, my wife, she's the OD development partner. Rita, Kwasi's wife, who does branding marketing. Kai and Dana Michi, our beverage director. Shelly Nason, our CDC, and Liam Cook, who is our kitchen manager.
Well, congratulations to
Thank
all
you.
of you.
Yeah,
It's great.
thank you very much. Have a
Great to
great
see you, and
time at
congratulations.
the
Keep
James
doing it,
Beard
gentlemen.
Awards.
Thank you.
We have been speaking with Biplaw and Kwaa of Comfort Kitchen in Dorchester's Upham's Corner, which is a finalist for the James Beard Award. And that is a very, very big deal. And the food you brought today and the food I've read about just sounds spectacular. So congratulations.
And if you want to
to both.
sponsor their trip to the Beards, info@comfortkitchenbos.com. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, after a
Great
quick
to see
break,
you.
CNN's John King joins us over Zoom, bringing us back to planet Earth with the latest on the trial in Manhattan of the former president, Donald Trump. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
There's a brand new way to enjoy some of your favorite NPR shows, and it's called NPR Plus. NPR Plus allows you to listen to a bunch of your favorite NPR podcasts, and you also get exclusive bonus content from shows like Planet Money, Fresh Air, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and more. And the best part? When you sign up for NPR Plus, your donation supports GBH. So give a little, get a lot in return. Learn more and sign up today at gbh.org/NPR Plus.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Rockland Trust Bank, dedicated to providing advice and support to the community for over 115 years. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back at the library tomorrow and Friday. Congressman Keating will join us. He'll Zoom in on Friday. He's just gotten back from Ukraine. And as we said, May 3rd, a week from Friday, a special remote broadcast, meaning we leave the studio and go to UMass Boston to University Hall. Jamie, is that the name of the University Hall? Anybody is welcome. We're joined now, speaking of Dorchester and Comfort Kitchen, on Zoom by the pride of Dorchester, well, along with the Comfort Kitchen guys, CNN's chief national correspondent, John King. John has been involved in two great reporting projects this election cycle all over the map and the battleground. Hello, John King.
Comfort Kitchen guys got me beat, but if you need an escort down Morrissey Boulevard,
Yeah, their food is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
So, John, let's start with the hearing this morning that was taking place involving the former president's violation of this gag order about what he can say about the trial. Do we know anything more about what happened, since we can't watch it on TV?
no, best I can tell, we're still waiting on the judge. They had a hearing this morning, and the prosecutors listed more than a half dozen occasions where they say that Donald Trump has violated the gag order by saying things he's not supposed to say about the process, about the jurors, about the jury generally, about the judge. And now the judge, and they want a $1,000 fine for each one of those, and and for the judge to make clear he's not going to tolerate more. But we're waiting for the ruling, and as we wait for the ruling, the testimony's underway, including the first witness who started briefly yesterday, back on the stand today, David Pecker, who used to run the National Enquirer, who is, of course, said to be right in the middle of all of this. He killed the story about Stormy Daniels, killed the story about. Is it Susan McDougal? McDougal, the other
Karen
one?
McDougal.
Yeah.
Playmate of the Year, I think, is what
Right.
she was. John, I don't understand, though, why the prosecutors would bother $1,000 and going up from there, because obviously the money is not going to dissuade him. Why even go there?
Well, I guess everyone has their own perspective. From the prosecutor's perspective, the rules are the rules, and you don't want to intimidate the jury. And so it's not so. I don't think it's so much about the money, but trying to get him to stop, in the middle of the process. Although, this is a judge who, of course, is going to say everything's going to be done by legal rulings. But you're in the most political environment. I mean, this is, again, Donald Trump has taken us someplace we've never been. A former president of the United States, the defendant in a criminal trial, and the judge has to know that if he sanctions Trump. From a legal perspective, he may have grounds to do that. From a legal perspective, perhaps it creates some discipline, at least temporarily, on the defendant's part. But politically, it probably helps Trump. And the judge has to know that.
You know, one of the things, this is not an original thought with me, but I've thought about it a lot myself. This is a guy who, from the first time I ever was exposed at arm's length to Donald Trump, the one characteristic that has always been with him is nobody can be bullied by him enough. You say anything that makes him unhappy, you look at him cross-eyed, he will savage you in any way he can. And even though we don't see it, when I read these accounts about him having to sit there, hear jurors, prospective jurors, describe him as a racist and other negative terms. The judge, Judge Merchant, telling him the other day, sit down, please. You can't leave the courtroom until I do. He didn't say those words, but he did say the sit down thing. And then listening to his former good friend, Mr. Pecker here, describing the predicate for what he's charged with criminally, and he has to sit there mute other than passing notes to his lawyers. Do you think, I mean, do you not think about that, John King?
Oh, look, despite any bravado Donald Trump tries to show in his public words or in his posts on Truth Social, nobody wants to be the defendant in a criminal trial. Let's just be real. Nobody does. Nobody does. And then beyond that, you're right. He surrounds himself with sycophants. He rewards sycophants. He rewards people who tell him how great and how awesome he is. And he punishes people who he thinks are not loyal to him. And so here he is powerless. He can't punish these jurors. He can't punish the judge. People who know him well say this is the stuff that, this is the thing he dislikes the most, being criticized, being called out with no chance, at least in the short term, to do anything about it.
You know, the other thing, I just want to say, I'm sorry, Margie, one more thing about Pecker being the first witness, and I understand it strategically, but the other thing is, I assume the prosecutors, and maybe they didn't need the January 6th committee to do this, they sort of took a page. When we watch the January 6th hearings, among the brilliant moves of the leaders of that committee was almost all the witnesses were people who had been either part of the Trump administration or supporters. When you start with a friend, a longtime friend with whom you've done a lot of business and pulled a lot of moves, it seems to me that's a pretty important way to start a criminal trial, John.
Yes. Number one, to establish that, as you noted, the most damning testimony about Donald Trump comes from people who operate within inches of Donald Trump, people who have been in Donald Trump's inner circle, people who have been trusted by Donald Trump. They're going to say now that Michael Cohen's a liar, and Michael Cohen certainly does have credibility issues from prior cases, but Michael Cohen was Donald Trump's enforcer for a very long period of time. Trust me, as a reporter, I've been on the receiving end of Michael Cohen when he worked for Donald Trump. He was his enforcer. He was trusted. He was an inside man. Stormy Daniels, they're also going to say, has no credibility. So to start with Mr. Pecker, the catch and kill architect, if you will, to help Donald Trump catch and kill these damaging stories. It is smart. It also just gets at something, Jim. This is the great, the parallel universe you encounter when you travel and you talk to Trump supporters. When, they tend to listen to him, at least a lot of them do, when he says, this is the Democrats, this is Joe Biden orchestrating this trial, which Joe Biden, the president, has nothing to do with the Manhattan prosecution, but that's what Donald Trump says. Versus, and they said the same sort of things during the January 6th proceedings, inside job, the Democrats, the hacks, the Republicans in name only. And where does the most damning testimony come from? People who Donald Trump trusted for years and asked to do his dirty work for him. That has not broken through. I think one of the questions for these trials is when you do get so much testimony from people who were at least once in the inner circle and very trusted, does it begin to break through with those who believe Trump's framing of all of this as, a partisan witch hunt out to get him?
One of the things I read or heard, I forget now, was the theory that the former president is behaving better in the courtroom this time around as opposed to when he's outside trashing people, because he went after the judge in the E. Jean Carroll thing, and jurors often have a certain affinity for the judge. He's kind of like their leader during the trial when they're, he tells them what to do, greets them in the morning, says goodbye to them at night, lets them out for dentist appointments and stuff if they need it. So that he's smartened up about that and is not going to be so antagonistic. And he does not seem to be doing much of anything in the courtroom, at least from what I've heard.
From the notes, I think that's fascinating because from the notes of the people in there, we've seen different things, right? At times he appears to be scowling, but other times he just appears to be closely paying attention. There was, at times he clearly doesn't want to be there. Other times he seems more engaged. But you make a key point, Marjorie. It's been a long time since I've been in the presence of Donald Trump. But years and years ago, when he was a Democrat or when he was thinking about running as an independent back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I did spend more time with him then. And he can be quite charming, actually. The Trump haters out there are going to get mad at me. He's very caustic. I call him the human chainsaw sometimes in how he treats people, but he also can be quite charming and quite sort of a backslapping locker room kind of guy. And so he got 77 million votes. So he has political skills, like him or not. I'm sure his lawyers have told him, and I'm sure he understands. You do not want this jury thinking you're a jerk.
Right.
On top of the testimony they're going to hear. So that's certainly, he knows how to do this. The question is, you often see, how many times during the Trump presidency you say, he hasn't tweeted in, a day. You do get these short doses of Donald Trump discipline. They almost often, though, don't last very long. So I think that's one of the challenges as you watch a trial, 6-7 weeks go forward. Can he keep it together?
John King, we've learned a couple things from you about polling, and no one understands it better than you. One, that it's always a moment in time until Election Day. And two, that national polls don't really mean that much because that's not how we determine outcomes. We do it state by state with electoral votes. Having said both those things, the last couple of national polls in the last week or so have shown some modest movement by Joe Biden. Do you attribute any of that to the fact that even though we can't watch him physically in the courtroom, I'm assuming most of America knows there's a president who they maybe support, a former president who's on trial for alleged crimes. Is there a connection or no?
Oh, I think without a doubt it's part of it. Look, I think it's a number of things, and you said it just right. When you look at a national poll, don't necessarily look at the numbers right now. We're so far out, but look at the trajectory, right? And so there has been a modest uptick for President Biden, both when you look at battleground state polling and when you look at national polling. No doubt about that. Still very close. There was one national poll that had Biden ahead of Trump. Most of the others have Trump a little ahead of Biden, but normally within the margin of error or just outside. So what do we have? We have a very competitive race that 2 weeks ago, I think I said right here 2 weeks ago, if the election were tomorrow, Trump would win. If the election were tomorrow, I'm not sure what would happen now.
Really?
I still give a slight advantage to Trump being out on the road because the president has more pieces of his coalition where he has enthusiasm problems, but the election's not tomorrow. So I don't even want to dwell on that point. There has been a slight uptick for the president. And if you're on Team Biden, that's encouraging because you just want the trajectory going your way. They have more building to do. I think part of it is the Biden campaign is spending money on advertising. The president is getting out on the road a little bit more. The vice president is out on the road quite a bit. And yes, I think a piece of it, Jim, without a doubt, is that the negative side of Donald Trump is front and center again. So you encounter some voters when you travel who have nostalgia for the pre-Trump COVID economy. They remember refinancing their mortgages, for example, when interest rates, were in the 2s or the low 3s, and now they're around 7. So that, people live their economies. People live their personal economy, their personal wallet life. And so some of them think, wow, I had that stretch early in the Trump years, so it was pretty good for me. And it's been tough since. And so if you don't see any of the, here's the Stormy Daniels case, and here's a hearing in the election interference case, and here's a hearing in the classified documents case, maybe you block all that out because you're busy. Now they're going to see it. It's that side of Donald Trump, like it or not, is going to be front and center for quite some time, most likely all the way through the election.
We're talking to CNN's John King.
John, we just had the former Congressman Joe Kennedy III on with us talking about Citizens Energy, his dad's old company that gets low-income energy gets people with low incomes energy help. Anyway, we were talking about, you asked him about Robert Kennedy, his cousin. His uncle, who just got on the ballot in Michigan, which is a very important state for President Biden, and where, was it 200,000 people who wrote no,
100,000.
Was it 100,000 in the primary because they were upset about Joe Biden and Gaza, and now we've just Joe Biden has not put any conditions yet on our aid to Israel. So what is the Robert Kennedy? I mean, it's early again, but what does that mean? Do you think at this point for Michigan?
Oh, he's in double digits in Michigan. I saw some polling. It's probably a month old, so we have to go back and look at it again. But where he was in double digits, I think he was at 12 or 13% in Michigan. Look, I think the general rule is the third-party candidates help Trump. There are some distinctions and some exceptions to that. But in most, in a lot of these states where Donald Trump has trouble getting to 50, he can get to 47. And so if you lower the bar, what wins? Ask Hillary Clinton about Michigan and Wisconsin in 2016. That's what happened with the third-party candidates, the combination of Gary Johnson and Jill Stein. And so Robert Kennedy is the leading third-party candidate right now, but there will still be a Jill Stein in some states if she is the Green Party candidate. There may well be a Cornel West in some of these states, although he's had more difficulty getting ballot access. I think without a doubt, this is a huge impact on this race. I will say I was just in Georgia last week, and among the voters we talked to was a Republican, 2016 Trump voter, who said he's going to take a look at Kennedy because he's a Christian conservative and he doesn't like Biden at all, but he doesn't view Trump, especially I asked him in the context of this hush money, this trial in New York. He says I usually vote my Bible, and I'm having a hard time finding somebody who fits how I think. Right? Doesn't see a candidate with character. He said he would take a look at Kennedy. So I think there are places where some Republicans might, but I think more often than not, it hurts the Democrat. And you mentioned Michigan. I'm going back out there next week to revisit. We're going to do two groups out there. One is auto workers, but one is to revisit the younger voters we went to see a few months back, where right after the Israel-Hamas invasion, the Hamas terrorist attack, and then the Israel response to it. And that's when we saw the raw anger at the president on the campuses with younger voters and among Arab American voters. And we're going to revisit that to see if it's tempered at all or if it's as bad or worse.
John, I'm going to ask you a question to which I know the answer, and you're probably saying, so why are you asking the question then, Jim? I'm watching your station last night, and I think I got the number right. I mentioned this to Marjorie. Since 2021, Donald Trump, out of his campaign funds, has spent a mere $77 million for legal fees. And in March alone, meaning last month, he spent $3+ million. Does anybody you talk to in your United States travels give a damn about that's how their contributions are being spent, or Trump's their man and whatever he spends it on, they're fine with?
The only place you hear complaints from it is big Republican donors who want to elect a Republican president and a Republican Congress who worry their money's going to lawyers, not the campaigns. Normal voters don't tend to raise this. It'll be interesting to see if over time, somehow the Democrats can make an issue of it. I think they have I think they have a list of other things they think, but can you fit it into the whole, Donald Trump says he's for you. He says he's your voice. Actually, you're funding his legal fees. You're his stooge, I think is the argument you could try to make if you want to do it. But it doesn't, campaign finance generally doesn't, people always say the big money in politics. Very rarely, you have certain issue set voters who think that way. But very rarely do people bring up the fundraising part. I do think, because there's so much of it here, it's mind-blowing. When you look at the campaign finance reports, amount of money raised, and then what has gone into campaign operations versus what has gone to lawyers, it is simply mind-blowing. And when Donald Trump does a fundraising agreement, if Marjorie is candidate X running for Republican somewhere and Trump does a joint fundraiser, guess what? You have to sign papers that say, yes, some of the money can go to do that.
Wow.
So the whole thing is set up to pay his lawyers.
So one last money-related thing is in the same report on your station last night, I forgot who was doing it, they mentioned that because of this, the available money from either the Republican versus the Democratic National Committee and the Trump campaign versus the Biden campaign, in both cases, the Democrat, Biden and the DNC, has roughly twice as much money available, the bulk of which is spent on advertising. How much does that really matter?
It's a good question. I'm of the school that I think in the social media, immediate, instantaneous communication age that, TV ads matter less than they used to. Mm-hmm. However, if you have an enormous lopsided fundraising advantage and you know that 5 or 6, maybe 7 states are going to decide the election, and you can put more money on television, develop a better digital operation, spend money on targeting. So you see, Marjorie's suddenly looking at different things and Jim's looking at different things, change our advertisements to get in on that and put boots on the ground in those states as well. If you think of this, it's a 50-state campaign, but it's really a 6 or 7-state campaign in the end. Maybe that changes, but if you look at the battleground states, Massachusetts is going to go blue, Montana's going to go red. So you're looking at your Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, the ones we always look at. And so, yes, if you have a fundraising advantage, without a doubt, and I think that's the challenge for the Biden, and it may well be, Jim, part of that slight uptick for the president, they have this huge advantage. Are they making the most of it? Are they being smart in how they do it? I think there's some evidence early on, yes, that the ads in Black communities, the ads in Latino communities have stabilized the president. The question is then, can you build from there?
Before you go, Thursday, Patriots pick number 3. Who do you want them to take, John King?
I assume they're going to trade it and go down. I agree. Ben Bowen had a nice piece in the Globe today about this. I assume they have so many needs that if they get a decent offer, they trade it and go down and pick a quarterback a little bit later and get a bunch. If they could get a couple guys for the Red Sox, too, that'd be nice because they got a lot of injuries over there.
Yeah. They do indeed. John King, as always, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
We've been speaking with CNN's John King, national correspondent involved with 2 great reporting projects this election cycle all over the map and the battleground, where he goes out and speaks with voters, and we don't hear enough from voters about what they think and why they think it. After a quick break, we are opening the lines. There's a dead in the water proposal. I don't know, I'm going to try to resurrect it, to put tolls at the Massachusetts border for people coming in here from New Hampshire. It's already drawing the ire of many, but honestly, would we be better off with fewer Granite Staters down here in Mass, mucking up the good thing we've got going? Massachusetts versus New Hampshire. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Michael Threets went from being an enthusiastic librarian to a beloved TikTok star. Now he's starting a new chapter as resident librarian for PBS Kids. Plus, we talked to television writer Bill Oakley of The Simpsons fame about his cult classic Mission Hill, celebrating its 25th anniversary. That's on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Eastern Bank, committed to helping people and businesses prosper by investing over $240 million in local charities since 1994. Eastern Bank. Join us for good. EasternBank.com. Member FDIC. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Liz Cheney, Andrew Lloyd Webber, news anchor Chris Wallace, and artificial intelligence entrepreneur Oren Etzioni. BostonSpeakers.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow, back at the library on Friday. So Massachusetts Transportation Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, who was, I think, being quite honest, apparently didn't do herself any favors when she floated the idea a couple days ago of putting up tolls at the Massachusetts border from New Hampshire as a way to boost transit revenue. And regardless of whether or not it was an offhand remark, hypothetically exploring all options to fix the budget issues our transportation system is facing. Her comment has become a top story over the past couple of days, with pretty much everyone coming out against it except for Marjorie.
Right.
You know, we have listeners in New Hampshire. Do you know that?
I know that.
Okay, good.
I know that.
State Auditor Diana DiZoglio, she's a Bordertown native, said the impact would be devastating. Governor Healy had to step in and say it is not going to happen. And former New Hampshire senator, now candidate for governor, who seems to be running against Maura Healey, not against running whoever's the Democrat up there, Kelly Ayotte, tauntingly tweeted, "Common sense Bay Staters, for your sanity and safety, bring your businesses to New Hampshire. We won't mass, M-A-S-S, capital letters, up our great state." It's really clever, Senator. Marjorie and I have a different take, however. We want to ask you at 877-301-8970 whether a toll on the border would be such a bad thing. Picture it. Fewer cars on the road, easier commutes, not to mention less of those, this is Marjorie speaking, not me, MAGA-loving Granite Staters scurrying across the border with pickup trucks full of fireworks. So in any case, what do you think? Is it time we Massachusetts residents fought back against the Ayotte narrative and stood up for what we love about our state? Again, call 877-301-8970. What is your argument?
Sarah from Waltham is
What'd
with
she
me
say?
too, Jim. She says, yes, take advantage of our great jobs and institutions and then retreat to their tax-free haven. Bring on the New Hampshire tolls.
Why are you supporting? I don't understand this. Why? Because you're upset with Kelly out, or what's
Carl
your deal?
from New Hampshire. We haven't heard from him for a long time. He says,
No, this is our Carl from New Hampshire?
I don't know, but it's a Carl from New Hampshire.
Well, there are a number of Carls.
I have wounded him. I thought we were friends. Carl from New Hampshire. I tell you,
what is your rationale? You haven't answered my question yet.
I think we need money for the MBTA, and all these people are coming coming over with their tax-free, no income tax up there in New Hampshire.
So sort of screw 'em?
Property taxes, and taking the jobs here. Yeah, that's right.
I like it.
Now, I would say I would not want to be in New Hampshire. You know what they have in New Hampshire?
No.
Crummy services.
They do?
Yeah. You get sick. You have your kid has an issue in school, like they have an IEP or something like
17th
that.
in healthcare in New Hampshire. What are we here?
First.
19th in education. What are we here?
First.
Among the toughest gun laws in the nation here. How are they in New Hampshire?
They have open carry in New Hampshire. You can go into like a grocery store or a CVS or your kid's soccer game, and somebody's got a gun.
Those people have to pay double tolls if they come across the border.
They should
You're the
just
most
stay where they
incredible
are.
thing in New Hampshire, I have to say.
What?
And by the way, let me be clear for the record, for those of you listening from New Hampshire, we love New Hampshire. Say that, Marjorie. Fine, we love New Hampshire.
It's okay.
Do you believe they let these lunatics ride on motorcycles without helmets? I mean, really?
Well, you know.
Thank you. 877-301-8097. You know what the one good thing they have?
We have much better hospitals.
No, forget that for a second.
What?
We pay our legislators, who you and I trash almost
They
every
do.
day, close to $100,000 each.
Well, I'm with them
How
on
much
this.
they pay theirs?
$100.
$100, exactly.
I think that's pretty good. We pay him. What do we pay him? 70,000, 80,000?
70, 80, 90, whatever
something like
it
that. The Boston.com
to
did
you.
a great story about this.
Yeah.
And they point out that we do have, even New Hampshireites must admit, we do have great beaches here that New Hampshire does not have compared to
Well, they have
ours.
some nice beaches, too.
We have Crane Beach, we have all the North Shore, and we have Cape Cod.
I've heard of
Jim.
Cape Cod, yes.
They do not have Cape Cod. You know what else they don't have?
No.
Marijuana.
They don't?
No, they don't.
That's a problem.
Yeah, Kelly Ayotte up there, I guess she doesn't like marijuana, and she's anti-choice, too.
Do you believe that? By the way, this is not our topic, but this Ayotte campaign, if you check her Twitter account, almost every tweet is something about how Healy's this and she's better.
You know why?
Again, she's not running here.
Because they're getting nuttier and nuttier up there in
They
New
are.
Hampshire, and she's got to win Republicans. And they've kind of gone off, the GOP in general has kind of gone off the deep end. There are very few normal Republicans. We're always looking for a few.
Well, they're
here
more
in
moderate. I
Massachusetts.
mean, the average Republican in New Hampshire it's not like.
And they've got a governor. I love this. John Sununu.
Yeah.
Who went on and on and on and on and on. Donald Trump will not be the candidate of the Republican Party. Donald Trump.
And he trashed him.
He would trash him constantly because he was a Nikki Haley guy. And now what's he doing now?
Supporting him.
That's right.
He said he'd support the Republican nominee. By the way, an anonymous texter says Marjorie wants her revenge on the New Hampshire glass door. So, and another anonymous, there's a lot of anger pent up here. Another anonymous texter says, I can't stand New Hampshire or Maine. Toll it up. So there you go. 877-301-8097. We're trying to have a moderately intelligent conversation about whether or not we should put up tolls on the border.
The people in New Hampshire hate us because of our woke, extremist, liberal derangement that exists there. That's
Can I say something serious
What?
about this? Why is it fair that we tax east and west with tolls on the turnpike, but don't tax north and south?
just another reason for my argument, Jim.
Yeah, well, that was you should have made that argument.
Tax them up, toll them up.
Toll
That's
them
right.
up, tax them up.
You should put one of those things over the top like we have in the Mass Pike. And then
What
you
are-
could,
what are those things called?
Well, I don't know what they're
What are
called.
they called, Jamie?
Transponder.
What are they
connect-
called? Gantry. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much. 877-301-8970. Let's go to Betty in Taunton. What do you think, Betty? Betty, you there?
I think that
Yeah, what do you say?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I think we can, yes. What? This is where you say, I'm a big fan of your show, and then you start talking. Go ahead.
I think we've lost her. Oh,
Hi.
there she is.
Yeah,
okay.
well, that's a good start. Go ahead. What's up?
I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
You're right. I am a big fan of your show.
That's about time. Yeah, it's a little late, but go ahead. What else?
So I think we should put the tolls up. When you go into New Hampshire, as soon as you cross over the border, you're paying a toll.
Exactly.
What's the difference?
That is an excellent point.
Exactly.
Why didn't you say that?
And you got to pay it on the way back, too. Right? You can sit on
Exactly.
95 forever waiting to come down and pay that.
That is a
pay
great.
that
So
toll.
they're tolling us already.
Yeah,
Why
they-
are we not tolling them?
Betty,
Betty,
I
that
mean,
was
you're
worth the
absolutely
wait.
right.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
A lot of hostility toward us here from these New Hampshireites. They're in this thing in the Globe. I
What
told
do they
you.
say?
Well, they say Massachusetts, too late to save. The communists have taken hold and can't be driven out. We will not let this happen in New Hampshire. And this was a common sentiment. They're always talking about the communists and the liberals and the socialists. You know, when you look at what liberals are for, they're what for most people in America for. They don't like giving tax breaks to the rich, which is what Donald Trump did. They would like to have better health care. He's against that. They would like to have better help with their colleges. He's against that. So the kind of ideas that
what does that have to do with tolling people coming in from New Hampshire?
It has to do with the people calling the liberals nuts. I mean, do most people want to have open carry? You want to go see your kid's soccer game and see the guy next to you? Remember years ago there was the two fathers at the hockey game that got in the fight in the parking lot and one beat the other one to death?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Can you imagine
Was that
if
New
everybody
Hampshire?
No, it was in Massachusetts.
Oh.
Can you imagine if people had guns in Massachusetts at all your kids' games? Why are you looking at me like that?
The arguments are not quite as powerful, I think, as you might. I mean, I'm very supportive of whatever your position is, but they're rather rambling. Have you noticed the arguments?
I think I'm making brilliant points,
one
after another
killed
after another.
somebody, which obviously is not a laughing
That's
matter.
right.
We know that at
That's
a hockey game, and that relates to tolling the border in what way exactly?
It relates to we would rather keep these gun-toting, open carry New Hampshireites
That's what I
in New
meant to say.
Hampshire as opposed to coming to Massachusetts.
Another anonymous texter says, while we're at it, let all the Olive Gardens move up to New Hampshire.
Well, that could be a good idea.
That would not be
Although
great
Jared,
loss.
that's one of his favorite restaurants. He loves Olive Gardens.
Do you remember when we were in there for a primary, 2 primaries ago? I shouldn't say this, even though it's a chain, because I don't know if they're a franchise. That was the single worst meal I've ever had in my life. Do you remember that restaurant?
Yeah, it was
Don't say it. We did go to, it's not called Hookers. What's the name of the?
Hooters.
Hooters. We did go to
Hooters
there a couple times ago.
That was pretty bad, too.
That was pretty bad, too.
Okay, Chris from Exeter, New Hampshire.
Perfect. Hi,
You should
Chris.
defend yourself, Chris. What do you think?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's not a black and white situation.
No.
Obviously, we have plenty of visitors from Massachusetts all summer long. I moved to the region 25 years ago. Weren't going to work in Massachusetts and couldn't afford to live in Massachusetts. So we drove circles around that area until we found a place where we could afford, and that happened to be New Hampshire. Secondly, there's a lot of us left-leaning New Hampshire folk up here. So I think a lot of the commentary here is a little off point.
So
that
take
it's not
that,
just a bunch
Marjorie.
Well, Chris, you're absolutely right.
gun-toting conservatives.
Don't go away, Chris.
There's a lot of New Hampshireites who really don't want you there, Chris, because you are left-leaning. They want you to go home to Massachusetts. They don't like you. Do you realize that?
Well, that may be true, but we've done a fine job of turning the state purple and closer to blue as we go. So
Now, Chris, what do you feel about the hate that Marjorie is spewing towards the people of New Hampshire? What's your reaction to that? Be as honest as you can be, please.
Well, we absolutely love Marjorie, but I have to say now we're thinking about our school week vacation this week, and instead of going to Boston Science Museum, maybe we'll go up to the Seacoast Science Museum.
Chris, you'll show her.
Okay.
Chris, thank you much for an excellent call.
I didn't know
We
there was a
appreciate it.
Seacoast Science Museum.
Well, there
but
is.
You know what they don't have in New Hampshire?
No.
Sidewalks.
Yeah, they do.
You know what else? No garbage.
What's the capital?
No
What's the
garbage
capital? What's the
pickup.
capital in New
Well,
Hampshire?
some places do have sidewalks.
Concord
does
no,
have
not
sidewalks.
Well, forget the capital. We were in Manchester.
Manchester,
for
they have
the
sidewalks
primary.
there,
They have
too.
sidewalks.
Some places.
So where do they not have sidewalks?
They're rare. They're rare. Yeah, people are even talking about this. They're upset about having to pay for sidewalks up there in New Hampshire.
That's it? Okay, fine.
877-301-8970.
Again, that is the sidewalk issue. Somebody will explain, I'm sure, that connection to the tolls too. But let's go to Worcester.
Is it Simon?
Is it Simon?
Or Simon?
Who is it?
Hi.
Say something. Who are you? Okay. So whoever is calling us from Worcester, I assume you have a name. What would that
I
name
don't know.
be?
Yeah. Okay, the person is not answering.
Okay, we'll put that on hold for a second, and we'll get back to whomever that is. This name I think we can pronounce. This would be Luke in New Hampshire, and I'm sure
Hi,
he is
Luke.
really angry at you, Marjorie. Go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So you all know the official motto of New Hampshire, live free or die.
Yes.
But what you don't know is there's an unofficial motto.
What is it?
How do we get Massachusetts?
Say it again?
Said, how do we get Massachusetts to pay for this?
You mean we're a bunch of fools for
No,
paying
we're
for
paying
extra
the
things?
tolls when we're there. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. The tolls, no tax, so all the retail businesses pay their business tax because they get their money from Massachusetts and the liquor stores, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, well, we got it. Luke, thank you very much for making the call there.
See this one, Sean from Boston?
What do you say?
Hi, Marjorie. 2 words that totally capture New Hampshire. Corey Lewandowski. No thanks.
By the way,
he was Trump's campaign manager the first time around. I remember trying to interview him. I don't know where you were that day.
No, I was. You got in a big fight.
Yeah, I couldn't get away.
Well, except I went to Corey Lewandowski's office in Washington.
Oh, that's right.
Remember, this is right. It was the day before Trump's inauguration in 2017, January, I guess it was.
Yep.
Remember, and Corey, you weren't there. Corey was for television. Corey Lewandowski motioned me over to the corner of his office. And he pointed and he looked out. He says, "Look out that window. What can you see?" And I said, "I see the White House. It's really pretty." And he said, "No. More precisely, what's that room right there?" Did I tell you what it was?
It was Trump's bedroom.
Trump's bedroom. And he literally got moist in the eyes. I mean, he got moist in the eyes. He was so excited that his guy was there. Another texter says, tolls, build a wall, which is a whole other thing. I think the reason the guy from Worcester didn't respond is because his name was not Simon. It was Tim, which
we were way off.
Relatively close.
I'm sorry. What do you think, Tim?
So
sorry
Tim,
about that.
Tim, what's your deal?
Yes, I've changed my name back to Tim.
Okay, thank you.
Wise move, I think, there, Simon. Go ahead.
Well, my girlfriend lives in New Hampshire.
I'm sorry.
And I live in Worcester. So I would get charged going to New Hampshire.
Good point.
And then getting charged going to Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I say let's be the better of the two and not charge them from coming in from New Hampshire. I also say this all started with Mike Barnacle telling people that many New Hampshire people don't have teeth.
No, Barnacle used to do an annual column. There was a riot comparing Vermont and New Hampshire. I think he did it every single year, and he did say that. And
Tim, but I think what you do is you don't have to pay if you're from Worcester or from Massachusetts.
Or find another girlfriend.
Only
do whatever.
That's right, you get another girlfriend. But only people that are official New Hampshire residents have to pay coming into Massachusetts.
Hey, Tim, on a serious note, why should we tax the east-west travelers and not tax north-south travelers? What's the answer to that?
Oh, no, I'm all for that. I mean, I'm actually against all tolls.
You are?
I'm actually against all tolls.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you, like an anarchist? What are you? What's the deal with you?
Well, I'm an atheist, number one.
Okay, well, that wasn't my question.
I am an anarchist, number two.
Okay.
No, it's okay. I'm an anarchist.
An anarchist?
Tim is an anarchist atheist.
And an anarchist.
I like that. Double A's, yeah.
I think
there
that
you
has
go.
something to do with childcare. Tim, thank you very much for your call there.
One of the texters says we should charge a toll to New Hampshire callers that call our show, Jim. What do you
How
think about
upset
that?
do you think
I don't want to do that.
Governor Healy, who we'll see on May 3rd, was with her Secretary of Transportation, even though she won't say that? By the way,
I'm with her. I think it's a great idea.
Well, whether it's a great idea or not, she was throwing out ideas saying we need more money for transportation. We should explore a whole host of things, including this.
Absolutely.
And you get slapped down for that.
All the people that come down from New Hampshire and ride the T around Boston should have to contribute to it. They contribute to it via the tolls.
It's an excellent point.
Because let me tell you, we can't be going 10 miles an hour in the MBTA forever, Jim. Just can't do it. Paulina from Waltham. What do you think, Paulina?
Hey, Paulina.
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, hello to you.
Hi, it's Elwina from Waltham, and I just wanted to say I thought this was all a joke when you started.
Yeah, Marjorie's serious.
I'm serious.
But Marjorie convinced me. And not only do I think we should charge tolls to people from New Hampshire, but we should extend this. Florida.
I agree.
Texas.
We're with you.
Montana.
Paulina.
Especially Florida and Texas.
You're a genius.
I like it. Are you in the transportation industry, or what
Tax
are
them
you?
all. That's right.
I like it.
No, I'm a
What are
thank you. Thank you for bringing this important issue to us.
Well, that was Marjorie's doing, so thank her.
That's right.
By the way, someone said, Jamie is saying, there is a small problem, but we assume, Paulina, as well, we'll work this out. We don't currently share a border with Florida.
It's okay.
But that's something that can be worked out.
The moment the Floridians come into the state of New Hampshire, they got them on the overhead, the gantries, that's what you call them, right? So they have them in the Mass Pike, you have your license plate number, and you're stuck with the toll, Jim. They just take it from you.
I have to say, in all the years we've been working together, you've rarely made such coherent arguments in defense. By the way, if anybody can call and tell us what the hell Marjorie is talking about, you get a free mug.
I think I've made a lot of very salient points here, Jim, and you're just jealous.
List the most salient point you've made so far.
They have horrible gun laws in New Hampshire.
So we should toll them when they come in.
I don't want people coming here with their
Well,
guns.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
By the way, do you know that you do know, on a serious note, most of the guns used in crimes in the state come from places like New Hampshire because the guns are so lax.
I went to a gun show there
With John
a few years
Rosenthal,
ago,
right?
and I was horrified.
You were.
All these guns, and you know what else they had?
No.
All this Nazi
I know.
memorabilia, which really gives you the creeps. And you can buy any kind of weapon you want with cash at those gun
Tell
shows.
people what you said when didn't they offer you a high-capacity magazine, and you said it was good.
They're illegal in Massachusetts.
You said that.
It was a high-capacity magazine, 30 rounds in one magazine. And I said to the guy, I'm from Massachusetts. You know, those are illegal. And he just said, hey, don't get pulled over by the state police on your way home.
That's important.
And speaking of being pulled over by the state police, you, of course, were pulled over with your no-tax, sales tax-free refrigerator coming over.
It's not a refrigerator. It was a tangerine, and it was from Canada.
No,
it was not a refrigerator. It was not.
From New Hampshire.
I was stopped by the Border Patrol for a tangerine 2 Christmases ago.
Okay.
Let's squeeze in Reverend Jim. We get a religious perspective on this from Plymouth. Hello, Reverend Jim. How are you?
Hey, folks. Marjorie.
Yes.
Build a wall.
Build a wall, absolutely, and make New Hampshire pay for it.
What do you think, Jim? Reverend Jim.
Yes. Actually,
Good
I
one.
have family in New Hampshire.
That was a good one.
Do they carry guns, Reverend Jim?
I was a gun owner with a Hunter, but not anymore, ever since I was ordained.
Yeah.
Good. Well,
there's a the New Hampshire people. I have family in New Hampshire, and they've been at war with Massachusetts forever, and people in Massachusetts don't care.
No, we don't give a damn.
Don't pay attention.
We don't, unless they're listening. Reverend Jim, thank you for the excellent call there. We appreciate it.
You see, Jim, even though my arguments have been all over the place, look how many people changed
No, they
their
were
mind
really
in this
powerful.
brief-
Your arguments
they were very
really
powerful. That's right.
Why don't you all write them down? We can talk about them. Maybe when Governor Healy is here, you can convince her that we should toll.
What's interesting? What's going on?
Mindless human storytelling set to Rodion Chedrin's score after Georges Bizet, performed live by the Boston Ballet Orchestra. The program concludes with one of the most recognizable moments in classical ballet, Kingdom of the Shades, opening April 25th at Citizens Opera House. Tickets at bostonballet.org. And Family Services of Central Massachusetts, offering the AmeriCorps Seniors, a program of volunteer opportunities for those 55 years and older, located on the 3rd floor of the Worcester Senior Center. Learn more at sevenhills.org/affiliates.
Classical Radio Boston is WCRB-FM 99.5 HD1 Lowell, Boston, WGBH-FM HD2 Boston, WCAI-FM HD2 Woods Hole, WJMF-FM Smithfield, Providence, and at classical.org.
Here's Kenneth Silido leading the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields with a Mozart aria transcribed for oboe. Heinz Holliger plays Ah, If in Heaven, Benign Stars.